Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. This is the latest in a series of videos looking at some of the most interesting houses in the world of Ice and Fire. Today we are looking at perhaps the biggest and most important and most fascinating house of them all, House Targaryen. So let's start up with just a sort of a brief overview of where we're at with House Targaryen, so we're all on the same page. As always, what I'm going to do with this is frame it around questions I've got from my patrons. I've got a lot of questions, so we've got a lot of stuff to be going through. But House Targaryen, they are a Valyrian family, and what that means is that they are one of the great families from old Valyria, this empire which ruled, I was going to say ruled the world, but it was ruled most of Essos, the largest continent, for many, many years. They were one of the 40 dragon riding houses, and they weren't one of the big houses. It's probably important to just point out that they weren't, back in the day, they weren't huge. They were just like a minor-ish house or a middle-ranking house. Then Daenerys the Dreamer, Daenerys Targaryen, had this vision that something bad was going to happen, that the Valyrian Empire was going to collapse. And so on the basis of that, House Targaryen upsticked and went from Valyria over to Dragonstone, which was a Valyrian outpost. It was the furthest west outpost that they had. That's where House Targaryen set up stock. Now, after that, suddenly we get the Doom of Valyria. We can talk about that a little if you want to, but basically all of Valyria, all of the other Valyrian houses, all of the other dragons, everything was gone. One huge explosion. The only people who survived were House Targaryen. They were based now on Dragonstone, and they were there for 100 years or so. Most of that time, they were sort of looking to the east, but then under Aegon, who became Aegon the Conqueror, they started looking west. They started thinking, you know what? How about Westeros? Why don't we take Westeros? And so he and his two sister wives, they invaded Westeros. And after that, obviously with dragons, they managed to take Westeros. Dawn held out for a while, but eventually even Dawn came over to their side. And we had 300 years of Targaryen rule, and the rest we know. So that's the sort of the history that we have here. The Targaryens are indisputably a magical family. They are the last of this ancient empire. There are others, so we get House Velaryon, House Celtigar, a couple of others who have got links across, who are Valyrian in some way, but then they're not of those 40 initial top families. They're not the dragon riders of Valyria. House Targaryen is the remnant of Valyria, and that is where we're at. And so that is the kind of the concept that we have here. We have, if you're thinking in earthly terms, imagine the fall of Rome. That was what happened with Valyria. We had this epic empire that was gone, and what we have left is just this one family. So that's where we're at. As always, I will be framing this around questions from my patrons, but I will pick up as much as I can from the chat as it's going through. Brigitte Richardson, thank you so much for the super sticker before we went on air. I really appreciate that, as well as Lauren T. Thank you as well. Marvin Martin with a super chat as well, saying, as mum, could Dany potentially ride all three dragons? Well, potentially, yes. But the point with the dragon riding and the Valyrians and the Targaryens, as we have them, is that this is about a bond. It's not about that you have the ability to ride a dragon. It's about a bond between a human and a dragon. And Dany has got that bond with Drogon, and so Yes, maybe she could have that bond with others, but we do not have a history of Targaryens who just like pick and choose which dragon they ride. We have a history of Targaryens who pick a dragon and ride that dragon. And so, yes, theoretically, Dany could potentially ride all three. In practice, no, she has chosen Drogon and she is riding Drogon, which means that the other two are now open for other people to potentially ride them. And we will get on later, I'm sure, to who are the candidates for riding those other dragons. So let's start off. We've got a whole load of questions, as I say, from my patrons. Let's start with one from Howland's little sister saying, I'm now listening to the audiobook of A Dance with Dragons and reading The World of Ice and Fire in a random fashion when I have a spare moment. I'm very curious as to why the Targaryens left Valyria and why they waited around on Dragonstone before conquering Westeros. Okay, so why they left Valyria, I sort of covered already. Daenerys the Dreamer, a member of House Targaryen, and House Targaryen has got this kind of magic about them that allows them to dream of the future. It doesn't happen to every Targaryen, but it happens to some Targaryens. And this is an important part in who they are as a family. It is picked up various times through the family tree, so we have to be just mindful of the fact that this may well happen in this generation of Targaryens as well. But Daenerys the Dreamer had this dream of the Doom of Valyria, and that is what persuaded the whole family. Now, it's very clear that they took her very seriously, because they did. They literally sold all the family holdings and moved as far away as they possibly could. So the Targaryens have a history of not only having this ability, this magical ability to see the future, but also taking it seriously. So that's why they left in the first place. As to why they hung around on Dragonstone for 100 years, because they did. There were several generations of Targaryens happened when they just stayed on Dragonstone. Dragonstone is not a huge island. The Targaryen family was not a huge family, but they started off with 5 dragons. By the time of the invasion, they had 3 dragons, but they didn't invade Westeros. Now, why? I think the answer here is probably buried back in the mists of time, to be honest. Because the Valyrians, yes, they could have invaded Westeros a lot earlier. They had the dragons. They could have taken whichever land they wanted. There is a rumor, a legend, that perhaps they tried many, many years ago. Perhaps they wanted to go over to Westeros, but there was a battle. There was some sort of turnaround that made them think, some kind of disaster. This is all in The World of Ice and Fire, if you're interested. It's just in a couple of sentences, because a lot of these ancient things, we don't have the detail. But the legend is that something happened at Old Town, at what is known as Battle Isle. This is where the High Tower was built. That something happened that made the Valyrians just pull back and go, okay, you know what? Essos is big enough for us. There's a massive continent. We can just rule that. So I suspect that there was something of a kind of a genetic memory for the Targaryens, that they didn't think about Westeros. Westeros was out of bounds. They were looking eastwards. George R. R. Martin has said as much. They were looking eastwards for 100 years while they were on Dragonstone. It was only with Aegon the Conqueror that they started looking westwards. So we don't know the actual reason why they didn't invade earlier, but it's probably something to do with this memory, this kind of like cultural memory of what had happened before, this kind of battle, this defeat, whatever it was that happened around Old Town that meant that the Valyrians just pulled all the way back. And we don't have more than that. Ryan Larkin, thank you so much for the super sticker. I do appreciate that. Mara Lee, thank you so much. That's an incredibly generous super chat, saying just a show of love, support, and appreciation for all the fabulous content and stories on both channels. I'm loving listening about Sinbad's adventures on the Well-Told Tale. You're deeply loved and the best. Well, Mara, thank you so much. You know how much I appreciate your support. The Well-Told Tale, for those who don't know, that's my second channel. I mean, I don't like the phrase passion project, but that's what it is. It's just something that I just really enjoy doing. I love the classics of science fiction and fantasy, the stories that have been told many, many times over. And what I try to do on my second channel, The Well-Told Tale, is just tell those classic stories. It's an audio narration channel, and I tell the great stories of science fiction and fantasy. And yes, we're doing stuff from the Arabian Nights. We've got Sinbad. Before that, we've also done Aladdin. Also, the sci-fi classics, things like the War of the Worlds. We've been covering Lovecraft stuff with the Call of Cthulhu as well. If you're at all interested in the classics of science fiction and fantasy, please do go and check out The Well-Told Tale. And Maura, thank you so much for that. I do really appreciate it. And also a super sticker. Thank you so much. That's very kind. Joshua Clock, thank you. Again, very generous. Again, thank you so much. Saying, became a patron after you turned me onto the books. Take more of my money. Thank you. Channel is worth more than Hulu, Netflix, and the rest combined. Wow. You're going to make me blush. Thank you. That's very kind, Joshua. I really appreciate that. It's one of the things that makes me keep going with this, is knowing how this affects people's lives, and I really do appreciate that. Marvin, so Joshua, thank you. I do thank you so much. Marvin Martin, thank you, saying, how is the bond established? This is the bond between a Targaryen, a Valyrian, and a dragon. Could John warg a dragon? Why incest when other families were available before the Doom? How are any still healthy? Okay, so just to pick up on how is the bond established, this appears to be quite like, if you imagine like the stereotypical, the Hollywood version of how do you like tame this wild horse, think of the horse whisperer or that kind of thing. That's how it is. When we get Nettles, who is this dragon seed, as they're called, probably, maybe even not, a bastard Valyrian child who manages to tame Sheep Stealer, this dragon, by feeding it sheep. And so it just seems to be creating this bond between the human and the animal, the dragon. And that seems to be what's going on, is you create this bond. So Daenerys did it by feeding Drogon and by spending time with Drogon, just creating a bond. So that's what's going on there. In terms of incest, now we don't know the situation before the Doom. We don't know exactly how the Valyrian Empire worked in terms of marital relations and all the rest of it. In terms of the Targaryens, they seemed very keen to retain this purity of the bloodline, as it were, from the Valyrian Empire. Now, that meant mostly intermarrying with themselves, but sometimes it meant, there are a couple, as I mentioned earlier, a couple of other families. The Velaryons are probably the greatest example, but there are a couple of others out there as well. Just to keep the bloodline pure, to allow them to retain this bond, because, as again we may well come on to a little bit later, the Valyrians and the Targaryens, it wasn't just that they're a magical family or a magical race. There was some kind of genetic manipulation that was going on that was making them linked to the dragons. The Targaryens are almost quite literally, it would appear, part dragon. It might be only a teeny little bit dragon, but they are part dragon, and that is what is helping this bond between the Targaryens and the dragons. It's not the only thing that is helping this bond, but it definitely is there. So that was what was going on. So the incest thing is just about trying to retain the purity of that link going across. Questions, just flicking through just to get to a question from Jimson Juice. Thank you so much. Saying, who is your favorite Targaryen king during the years of their rule over Westeros? Oh, favorite is it's quite a loaded one. I guess probably Aegon V, Egg from the Duncan Egg stories. He's, if only because I've seen so much more of his character than I have of the other Targaryens. Jaehaerys obviously was in many ways a good king. I'm going to come on to Jaehaerys in a moment because I've got a slightly different slant on Jaehaerys to many people, it has to be said. But Aegon is probably the closest there was to a purely good Targaryen king. So that's probably who I would pick as my favorite during that time. Laruhu Dinalankara saying, hi Robert, what if the Targaryens paid the faceless men and blew it up and said, oh, our daughter had a dream. Thanks for the content and be safe. Thank you. I am definitely trying my very best to stay safe, and I have managed it so far, so thank you. In terms of, were the Targaryens behind the doom of Valyria? I mean, I've heard this from various places. I know that this is something that Joe Magician has speculated on. I'm not entirely sure whether Matt is 100% signed up to it, but my take is that no. Why? Because what would they gain? The Targaryens, yes, maybe if they'd wiped out everything and then after that, as a family, they'd taken over Essos. I could have gone with this. Okay, fine. They were the ones who are behind the Doom of Valyria, but they didn't. For generations after the Doom of Valyria, they just stayed put and didn't really do much. They had some dragons. Most of the dragons they had died. Another generation came and went. There's no clear gain for them. They just sat on smelly old Dragonstone and waited there for a couple of generations. So the Targaryens weren't really. No, there's nothing to suggest that they were behind this. They didn't make the best of the situation. They didn't try and conquer Essos. They didn't try and do anything like that. In terms of whether or not they made this up, no, I don't think so. I think the most likely thing that we've got going on here is, well, I did a whole video on it, and it's a little bit convoluted, but you have to work out who gains, as in all of the best murder mysteries, who actually gains from this. It wasn't the Targaryens. They didn't gain from this, not for generations. Who gains from it? Well, whoever wants there not to be Targaryens and magic and dragons. And so I think you have to... The Faceless Men did it, but it's a matter of who paid the Faceless Men. Spoiler alert, I think it was probably the Maesters, but check out those videos. Marvin Martin saying, why question over Nettle's heritage? Why is she the only one who bonded with food? So... Nettles did not look like a Valyrian is the only question that we've got going on here. So during the Dance of the Dragons, then the Targaryens on Dragonstone, they had too many dragons. It was an odd situation for them to be in. They had too many dragons and not enough dragon riders, and so they said, "Okay, we have effectively, are there any Targaryen bastard children here who want to give it a go?" And lots of them tried, and some of them succeeded. And one of those who succeeded was Nettles. Now, Nettles looks almost the opposite to the classic Valyrian look. Now, was she a Valyrian bastard? Probably. We don't know. We know very little about a lot of these characters, it has to be said. So, do we question her heritage? No, I don't think we question her heritage. But I think that we say that she definitely tried a different approach to everyone else. Sheepstealer which was the dragon that she bonded with, was a notoriously hard dragon to bond with. Sheepstealer had killed various other people who tried to bond with it. She tried a different approach. I take what happened with Nettles and Sheepstealer as a clue to what actually the bonding process is about. It's not just this magical thing that, you know, a Valyrian and a dragon, they lock eyes and that's it. It takes a whole lot more than that. It takes some kind of a bonding process, and so that is what I think is going on there. It's not about what Nettles' heritage was about. It's about how we understand what the process is and how the process works. I had another question from Natalie Donald. Actually, just saying, hi, Robert. Just want to say thanks for all your hard work, especially the last few months. By far my favorite creator. Natalie, thank you so much. And I got a question from you over on Patreon as well, so I will definitely be picking that one up in a little bit. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Andrew K saying, I wonder something similar. They seem to be in a decent, powerful position without seeming to draw ire or under threat from the freehold. So I wonder what the motive was as well. Yeah, so there is no clear motive for the Targaryens to be doing the Doom of Valyria is the basic point that I've been trying to make here. Kevin Warner saying, hi Robert, good stuff as always, backpacking off your last video. Who do you think Quaithe is? Shira Seastar? Question. Yeah, I try. I mean, you say backpacking off my last video. I try where I can to try and make these live streams link into the videos that I've been doing previous to that. In terms of who is Quaithe, I did a video about Dany's dreams from Quaithe, if that's the right way of saying it. If you've ever wondered what is it that Quaithe is trying to say to Dany, what is it that Quaithe is trying to achieve, then do check that video out. It came out a week or so ago. Do I think Quaithe is Shira Seastar? Probably is my short answer. For those who don't know, Shira Seastar is a great character. She was one of Aegon the Fourth, one of the Targaryen rulers, had a number of bastard children. Now, they were all, or many of them were epic. Bloodraven was one of them. Another one was Daemon Targaryen, who became Daemon Blackfire, and another was Shira Seastar. Now, she was known as a magic user. She was known as a witch. We get little bits about her from Egg in the Dunk and Egg stories. She was paramour of Bloodraven and many, many other things. Now, she kind of disappears from the story. We don't really know what happened to her. So, what did happen to her? Well, we don't know is the short answer. So we can't be absolutely sure on this one. But Quaithe gives every impression of trying to get Dany to embrace her Targaryen self. She always just is like, the dragons know who you are. just like, "You're the mother of dragons," she says to her. That's who she names her. And again, she's trying to draw down this point that Dany is a Targaryen. She has to embrace her Targaryen heritage. So we have to ask, what is it that Quaithe is wanting? She's wanting her Dany to be a Targaryen, very Targaryen-y. Why might she want that? Well, the obvious answer is because Quaithe is a Targaryen herself and doesn't want Dany to sort of go off down and dilute herself by being just the Queen of Meereen or whatever. And which Targaryens do we know that are magical and disappeared and all the rest of it? Well, Shira Seastar is probably top of that list. Added to which, there's a symmetry, there's a balance here that I love. That is that we've got two main possibilities for this kind of Azor Ahai, prince that was promised, leader of humanity against the others figure. And these two main characters are John or Daenerys. Now, John has a champion already, Bloodraven. Bloodraven has been working for decades, if not centuries, trying to get John into the right place and the right position to be the prince that was promised. Who is it who is supporting Dany? Well, it's Quaithe. Quaithe is the person who is constantly trying to push Daenerys in order to go west. She has to go east to go west because she wants her to get back to Westeros. There would be a beautiful balance if the two people who are supporting these two main characters are Bloodraven and Shira Seastar, who were lovers, who then got separated. And they are probably, so they must have shared some knowledge beforehand, this idea that they are building for something, and perhaps they have both seen this spark in a person, and they've decided to become their patron. They've decided to push them, manipulate them, bring them to where they need to be. And that, for me, works perfectly. That Bloodraven and John and Shira Seastar and Dany are these two opposite groups that are trying to achieve exactly the same thing. We know that the Weirwood network does not extend across to Westeros, so all of this would be completely outside of what Bloodraven is aware of. I think I had one more question if I can find it, which was Marvin Martin saying, why no other Targs try the Nettles way? Why did George R. R. Martin waste two good dragons, aka Cannibal and Grey Ghost? So I don't think George R. R. Martin wasted any dragons. I think he showed that dragons are their own creatures and they can do whatever they want. Why didn't any other Targaryens try the Nettles way? Well, you have to understand that the Dance of the Dragons was the last of the dragons. After the Dance of the Dragons, they were down to 5, I think it was, and they died very quickly. So the Dance of the Dragons was the end. There was no more. There was no more. How do you bond with a dragon? After that, the Targaryens were obsessed with how do you hatch a dragon egg. That was the thing that they were always going for. So that's why no one else tried the Nettles way, because after the Dance of the dragons have gone. So it's that seems to be the way to do it, but the knowledge then was pointless because there were no dragons. Okay, let's go to a question from my patrons. Samuel Leask. My question is about a response George R. R. Martin had in an interview a while back, where he suggested that when he invaded, Aegon the Conqueror might have had some idea about the threat that he eventually saw coming from the north, i.e. the others. And that was why he unified the Seven Kingdoms. How would he have known about them? And why wouldn't he have taken further action if he did know about the others? Okay. This is a good question. And this is something that came out in an interview. It was a Random House interview with George R. R. Martin in the kind of the promo materials for Fire and Blood. So we're going back a couple of years now. So the promo materials for Fire and Blood, George R. R. Martin gave a couple of on-camera interviews, teasers, as it were, for Fire and Blood. Now, we didn't see exactly what he was asked in that, but what he said was that there is some speculation that perhaps Aegon the Conqueror knew about the others or dreamed about the others and wanted to unify the Seven Kingdoms in preparation for that. Now, we had clarification on this point because it's the kind of thing that the publishers probably didn't realize quite how seriously the nerdy community, that's us by the way, guys, would take this kind of thing. The clarification came through Elio, who works with George R. R. Martin on The World of Ice and Fire and many other things, that this was George R. R. Martin talking about speculation within the A Song of Ice and Fire community. This isn't him saying that there's a possibility of this. This isn't George R. R. Martin saying that people within the World of Ice and Fire speculated that this is why Aegon invaded. This was simply George R. R. Martin acknowledging the fact that some people have speculated on that point. Now, once we get that clarification, we kind of have to take a step back and go, okay, so maybe, George R. R. Martin acknowledged the speculation, but he didn't confirm it. So maybe we should just have a look at what Aegon did after he conquered. If Aegon's primary motivation for invading Westeros was because he had this vision, or someone around him had this vision of the others attacking from the north, coming down, breaking down the wall, and all the rest of it, he would surely have spent some time in the north looking at the wall, investigating the defenses, trying to pull the Seven Kingdoms together. He didn't do that. He didn't do that at all. He did many tours of the Seven Kingdoms. He didn't really go up to... I don't think he even went to the wall at all. He went to the north, but didn't ever get all that far up there. So he didn't spend the money trying to build the wall's defenses. He didn't try to build up the Night's Watch. He didn't do any of the things you would expect if that was his primary motivation. So I think we have to accept the fact that this is just one of those things where George R. R. Martin said something that excites us, the fans, and it wasn't exactly what we thought that he meant. So sorry, but I suspect that actually that's not the case. Maybe a vision was part of the reasoning behind this, but this wasn't the main part of the reasoning behind this. This was just he wanted to invade the Seven Kingdoms. Okay, 26 Art Girl saying, it's been a while since you last covered the letter that was received after Aegon the Conqueror's sister died and his subsequent reaction. Do you have any different thoughts on it now? No, I don't. For those who don't know the background to this, so when Aegon conquered, Dawn resisted, and there were 2-3 attempts under Aegon to take Dawn, and each time the Dornish just disappeared away into the sand and the mountains and all the rest of it, and they just would not bend the knee. So on one of those occasions, Rhaenys Targaryen her dragon was shot down, Meraxes, and she disappeared, presumed dead. Now, what happened after that was that there was a change in power in Dawn, and following that, the new Princess of Dawn went up with the skull of Meraxes, went up to King's Landing and basically sued for peace. Brought with her a letter from the new Prince of Dawn, and Aegon opened it, read it while sat on the Iron Throne. He gripped the Iron Throne so hard that he bled. He then got on his dragon, Balerion. He flew to Dragonstone. A day later, he flew back. And after that, he declared peace. He said, okay, we're not going to try and invade Dawn now. Let's just have peace. So the question is, what did that letter say? Now, what I said at the time was that I still stand by, so I'll just set it out. That Aegon, we're told, was already weary of war. He didn't want more bloodshed. He didn't want more fighting. And when the Dornish, this was holding out an olive branch. They brought back Meraxes' skull. This was them saying, okay, we don't want war. Let's live at peace. It's not a we'll become part of the Seven Kingdoms. That didn't come for a long time, but let's live at peace. And what was in that letter? Well, clearly it needed to get some kind of completion for Aegon in terms of what happened with his sister wife. Now, he went to Dragonstone, he came back, he got that kind of completion. What could it have been? Maybe they'd taken her body up there and he could burn the body. Maybe that was what allowed it. Maybe they'd the Dornish had said, okay, so we captured her, yes, but she died, but here's the body back, let's now live at peace, we're sorry. Maybe they provided some sort of tribute. I don't know all of the details. None of us can know all of the details, but clearly whatever it was that the Dornish had taken to Dragonstone, because they must have done, because when he went there, Aegon went to Dragonstone in order to see something. Whatever it was that they'd sent there gave Aegon this kind of completion, this satisfaction, this idea that he didn't need to go for revenge. He didn't need to go to carry on conquering. Everyone in his court seemed to be advising him to carry on with this, but he was weary of war, and whatever he heard made him think, that's it, I don't need to do any more. So I haven't read or seen or thought anything different since then that makes me think that there was a different thing in that letter. That there are two broad options. One is that he was threatened by something and decided, that's enough, I'm scared, I'm not going to carry on doing it. The other was that he got this satisfaction. There's nothing that suggests that he was scared by what he saw in the letter. He came back, afterwards he was very good relations with the Dornish. He went to visit the Dornish after that, House Martell. There's nothing to suggest that this was a threat in any way. It seems to be some kind of thing that could bring peace and completion. And so for me, it probably was the return of Rhaenys's body that he could then burn. That's where I'm at, and I've not seen anything else that has persuaded me any other way. If you're interested in that video, it was a couple of years ago now, but if you look for Aegon the Conqueror letter or something like that, I'm sure you can find it on my channel. Eric Ferg saying, who is behind the serial killer of Dragonstone in Fire and Blood? Andrew Farman was illiterate, untalented, and without wealth. Who paid for the tears of Lys and guided the simpleton? How upset was that patron that Andrew didn't assassinate Rhaena earlier in the process? Okay, so this is something that was one of the good stories, really good stories in Fire and Blood. Now, we have Rhaena Targaryen, who was... she was the eldest daughter of the king. She had been known as the queen in the west and then the queen in the east. And she had been married to this guy called Andrew Farman. Now, this seems to have been a sham marriage from the start and became increasingly so through time, in that it seems that she was gay, she was lesbian, she didn't want to be married to a man. That wasn't what she was about. She surrounded herself with a whole load of women, and at least one of them, Alyssa Farman, we know about, probably was her lover. So Andrew Farman, yes, he doesn't come across as being particularly intelligent. We're told that he was illiterate. But what happens is that at Dragonstone, after what for him would have appeared to be several snubs, there was a series of poisonings. And the poisonings were only of women, and the poisonings seem to have been focused in on the people who perhaps were his wife's lovers. It seems that he was indeed the person who was killing them. And then after the last one of these died, she confronts him and he says, no, that's it. That's the last one. It's all done. He effectively admits that it was him. So the question is, was it just him, or was there some mastermind behind all of this? My general take, I mean, I've read this a few times now. My general take is that probably was just him. It's hard to see exactly what kind of political advantage anyone could gain from this. He probably did feel emasculated in some way. It's hard to say. I mean, you say he wasn't. The question is to say it was without wealth. He had access to money. He was the husband of a Targaryen. He was on Dragonstone. He had access to money. He could get access to things like the Tears of Lys with this poison if he wanted to. I personally think Occam's razor suggests this was just him exacting his revenge for what ills and evils he felt put upon him. It doesn't make him a very nice man. It makes him quite a horrible man, to be honest. But it seems that that's probably what George R. R. Martin was wanting us to see, is somebody who had imagined his way into great power and wealth, but then suddenly discovers that actually not all is as it seems, and he feels this grudge. So that, for me, is what's going on. I don't think that he was quite as unable to think this up for himself. I think it's a very simple thought process to go, I feel betrayed, I feel as if I've been sidelined, I feel as if all of my dreams have been broken. What do I do now? I lash out. That seems a very very human thing to be doing. So personally, I suspect it was him. The Purple Lord Leo Anansi, thank you so much for the super chat, saying, is there any overlap between Bloodraven's machinations and the Maester/Northern conspiracy? Their end goals seem complementary, if not the same. Okay, so there is some overlap here, but I do not think that they are on the same team. So For those who don't know, in terms of the Maester / Northern Conspiracy, I'm assuming what you're talking about here is this this idea that the Starks were they were very happy in the north. They just stayed up there. There was no problems for them. And then suddenly they had these Southron ambitions. Where did they come from? Quite possibly they came from the Maesters. Out of that, Lyanna met Rhaegar, and then obviously the Robert's Rebellion and all the rest of it followed. Bloodraven clearly was very keen on getting Rhaegar, and clearly in my mind anyway, getting Rhaegar and Lyanna together. So yes, obviously that works well that they that the Starks were suddenly opening up to the south. I don't think that they were working together. I think that Bloodraven was being the opportunist here. I think that Bloodraven was understanding what was happening and he was manipulating it and making the best of it. I don't think they were working in concert. I think the Maesters had their agenda, which is very much about ending the rule of the Targaryens and the dragons and all the rest of it. Bloodraven saw that and was manipulating over the top of it. So that is how I see this one, the sort of the interrelation between these two things going on there. Yes, their end goals are similar, but I don't think it means that they're exactly the same. Jack Grice, thank you so much, saying favorite YouTuber. Hope you're good, mate. I am very well, thank you so much. Joe Magician is in the chat. Hi there, Matt, saying someone made an awesome video about this. I'm not entirely sure who you're talking about, Matt, but I will give a shout out to Joe Magician, who is one of the finer YouTube Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire YouTubers. If you've never come across Joe Magician, he's a friend of the channel, has been on here several times. I would highly recommend, and I'm sure if you're watching live, my moderators will put a link into the chat. Please do go check out Joe Magician's channel. And we have Lexi8971, thank you so much, saying, oh, just wanted to thank you for all your knowledge and kindness. That's very kind of you to say. Thank you so much. Well, Joe is contradicting me, and this is one of the things that Matt brings so many times to this channel is an opposite view, which I very much appreciate, and I mean that genuinely. Saying it's hard to buy Tears of Lisa when you're illiterate. My take is no, it's not. But maybe we'll have that discussion another day. Let's have a look. I think I'm caught up on all the super chats, in which case let's go to a question from Brennan Barnes saying, I'd love to hear your thoughts on King Baelor. And this is Baelor the Blessed, I assume, a seeming outlier when you look at Targaryen history. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the reasoning behind some of his more controversial edicts. Do you think there's more to his pious zealotry? And reflective rambling, I know that you also, you didn't ask a question, but you were intrigued by the role of the Faith of Seven interacting with the House Targaryen. So, okay, let's take this sort of in the round. Baelor the Blessed was... He was a king who was indeed very different to many Targaryen kings. He embraced the faith of the Seven. The Targaryens have traditionally lived in some kind of a tension with the faith. They so the Targaryen insistence on being different and better and other, able therefore to obey different rules, to marry incest, to marry brothers and sisters, for example, polyamory, to be able to marry more than one person. These are the things that the Targaryens held that they could do because they were slightly different and better than the faith. And almost all of the Targaryen kings held to this idea that they are different and better and shouldn't be held to the same rules as everyone else. Baelor the Blessed is an exception in that he was a septon of the faith, and he seemed to be genuinely wanting to put the faith above this idea of Targaryen exceptionalism. So, what's going on here? Is there another level to what was going on? Well, his reforms that he enacted many things. Some of them were just what we might today consider slightly puritanical reforms. So, for example, he outlawed all prostitution, all sex workers within King's Landing. But at the same time, on the other hand, what he did was he emptied the royal coffers to make sure that everyone, all the small folk, had bread to eat. So, in many ways, that was good. In fact, well, that in and of itself was clearly good. Now, other things that he did, he decided, so he took over after effectively the murder of his predecessor, and then he went on this penitential walk, or in fact not even a walk, he was crawling all the way over to Sunspear, and achieved peace with Dawn. This had taken a century and a half for the Targaryens, but he managed to negotiate peace with Dawn and a marriage between his heir and the heir of Dawn, or the daughter of the heir of Dawn, and this sealed the peace between the two countries and brought Dawn within the Seven Kingdoms. So again, that seems pretty good. So he did a lot of good, but at the same time, he seems to undermine what the Targaryens are about. Is there some other kind of thing going on here, some kind of realpolitik? I don't think so. I think he just was this idealistic character. I think he was just doing what he thought was right as per the faith. He was the person who got the Great Sept. It was called the Great Sept of Baelor because he was the person who instigated that. He effectively brought the faith of the Seven away from Old Town, where it had historically been, and he brought the center of gravity of that into King's Landing. And so where he left the throne, the Targaryen dynasty, was probably, in a realpolitik way, probably in a better place. He'd strengthened the kingdom. He'd expanded the kingdom. Dawn were now part of the Seven Kingdoms. He got the small folk on the side of the crown in a way that they really had never been. He brought the faith of the Seven into the orbit of the crown. And if you read Fire and Blood, you'll see that there were many attempts by the Faith of the Seven to be opposing the Targaryens, and it didn't stop them all, but the prevalence of that kind of opposition did definitely diminish after that. So he probably did actually lead to a better and stronger position for House Targaryen afterwards. I don't think this was actually him with some master plan. I think this was just the result of who he was and what he was trying to achieve. Christina B, I can't stay. Thank you so much for the super chat, saying I can't stay but will watch tomorrow. Looking forward to more Fire and Blood content as we get closer to House of the Dragon. Your videos are the best. Thank you so much. Yeah, so as we get closer, and we're now starting on this casting now for House of the Dragon. I think this probably means if they're filming in 2021, as is the idea, then we're not going to see this before 2022. So I think still 2 years is probably a decent guess. But as we get closer to it, yes, I will start unpacking more and more of what this means, what's the background to all of this, and particularly the Dance of the Dragons. This is going to be the focus of House of the Dragon, and I will be trying to unpack more of it as we get even closer. So thank you so much. Stephen Dillon saying, speaking of Baelor the Blessed, there was a theory he was going to invade the North since they follow different gods. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah, it would be in line with his thinking. He spent most of his time focusing in down on the south, it has to be said, with Dawn, and then with what's going on in King's Landing. There are even rumors that his life was ended prematurely by his successor in order to try and bring the Targaryens back to Targaryeniness, because had he continued, then yes, this would have turned into a religious state. Might he have tried to turn on the north? That's very possible. He did not have dragons, though. Let's not forget this. And any attack on the north would have been a very, very hard prospect. So perhaps he could have done. That wasn't top of his list of priorities, it has to be said. The north, for most of the time during the Targaryen rule, the north was just like a slight sideline. They just allowed the north to do whatever the north wanted to do. They didn't care about it too much. I imagine if he'd ruled for 50, 60 years, then yes, he would have got to it, but that wasn't top of his list. Drew Mast, thank you so much for the super sticker. I appreciate that. Dominican Stud 101, thank you. That's very generous. Super chat saying, I started a Game of Thrones on the 23rd of December 2018. And finished a Dance with Dragons on the 16th of June 2020. So you only just finished. Excellent. I'm currently reading through A World of Ice and Fire, and then I'll go on to Fire and Blood. I've consumed so many of your videos and live streams that this is my first time watching live. Well, first of all, thank you for the super chat. Secondly, welcome. It's fantastic to have you here on a live stream. It's a very different experience watching live, getting involved in the chat, getting a chance to ask a few questions. So welcome, and I'm so glad that you've done that. I would highly recommend, if you've not read them after you've done Fire and Blood, then do get on to the Dunk and Egg stories, because they were fantastic. So do consider that after that. I think that's me caught up on the chat. Robert Stevens saying, many Targaryen rulers died from questionable illnesses. In your estimation, how many do you think were poisoned? I count 5. I'm not gonna. That sounds about right. Does it sound about right? It really depends on how you interpret it. I think that there's 5 that could have been, but not necessarily actually were. But yeah, the Targaryens, they don't always necessarily live full lives, it has to be said. Let's go to a question from Lady Pushkins saying, hi Robert, hope you're well. Thank you. I'm very well, thank you for the streams. Do you think Jenny of Oldstones could have used a glamour to seduce Duncan Targaryen with the help of the Ghost of High Heart, thus planting the seed of the prince that was promised? Okay, so where I see this is Aegon the Fifth, Egg, as we know him from the Dunk and Egg stories, he, having come to power, he was Aegon the Unlikely. He hadn't expected to come to power. Lots and lots of Targaryens had to die before he came to power. I've set out my theories on how this happened in my Bloodraven video, so do go and check that out. Short version is, I think that beyond reasonable doubt, someone was killing off the Targaryens. There are so many. They died at a rate of about 1 a year, heirs to the throne, which is just not natural. The person who seems to be behind all of this is obviously Bloodraven. So that's what's going on. But then Aegon comes to the throne, and he has 4 children, and he decides all 4 of those children have to marry for political reasons. He sets them up with influential families in Westeros, and none of the 4 marriages goes ahead. We have to ask why. Surely at least one of them would work out, but no. The heir, Duncan Targaryen, falls in love with Jenny of Oldstones. Now, we don't know why. We don't know what's going on. It's possible. We always have to accept the possibility. Perhaps I'm a hopeless romantic, but we always have to accept the possibility that maybe he just fell in love with this woman. But it does seem suspicious. It does seem we've got the Woods Witch, becomes the Ghost of High Heart many years later, who has all of these, white skin, red eyes, all of the characteristics of being something to do with Bloodraven, the Weirwood Network, and all the rest of it. She is very closely connected with Jenny, and the fact that Duncan then marries Jenny of Oldstones, which causes him to come out from the succession, that seems to be more than coincidence. So, could they have used a glamour? I don't know if a glamour is technically, this is something that makes you look like someone else. I don't think that was the mechanism. I think it was, if anything, it was the equivalent of a love potion. But they seemed happy. Is something we shouldn't overlook. The 2 of them. This wasn't just some short-term thing that got him out of the succession. They stayed together. They married. They were happy. That this isn't a pretend thing. They actually genuinely seem to like each other. So, yes, there probably was some magic involved, but we don't know exactly what. Michael Brindley, thank you for the super chat, saying, "You're a Targaryen. Which dragon would be your mount and why?" Great as always. Thank you. I don't know. It's a good question. Balerion is the obvious answer. Balerion the Black Dread was ridden by several Targaryens through the years and is the archetypal Targaryen dragon. I think it would be hard for me to pick any other dragon apart from that. Ancient, the only dragon who had memories of old Valyria, and when you see Drogon has this the imagery of Balerion the Black Dread. So yes, massive and hugely impressive as a dragon. Question from Jay Harris Stargathista, saying, "Thanks for your insights. What do you think of R plus L equals John and Mira? Maybe Bran the Broken gets married to a Targaryen to seal the deal. Have you seen a Bran Mira marriage theory anywhere else?" Okay, so breaking down the first bit of that, R plus L, Rhaegar and Lyanna equals John plus Mira. My take is that Mira is indeed the daughter of Howland Reed, but the daughter of Howland Reed and Ashara Dane. If you want my take on that, then I've done various videos on that, but I think one of them was almost that exact title, so please do go and check that one out. I think that Howland Reed and Ashara Dane, if you're not on board with this, please at least check the evidence, but it sounds like you're picking 2 random names from Robert's Rebellion and saying they're together, but there's a lot of evidence that they got together, and that they did have a child. Mira Reed is that child who was born around the same time. Maybe Bran the Broken gets married to a Targaryen to seal the deal. Have you seen a Bran/Mira marriage theory anywhere else? So Bran, who is still a child in the books, yes, there's sort of, you could call it foreshadowing, I guess, but I think it's more sort of hints of him looking at people with a slightly childlike gaze. Yes, he likes Mira, but I don't think there's any hint that the two of them are going to get together. And added to which, I think we have to accept that Bran is still going to be a child of we don't know how long, but probably still a preteen by the end of the Song of Ice and Fire. So I don't think we're going to be seeing him marrying anyone. Might he marry a Targaryen to seal the deal? Because obviously, yes, you could marry in that world. You could marry off people before what we would consider marriageable age. Might they marry? Well, the question is which Targaryen. Dany, I almost certain will be dead. Then there aren't really any other female Targaryens unless you count Mira, and I don't think Mira was actually a Targaryen. I think Mira was Helen Reed's daughter. So the short answer, I think, is no, but more because I'm a big believer in Helen and Ashara. Celia Tanner saying, "Hi Robert, what kind of accent do you have? Your American fans drool over it constantly." Well, I don't know. Please give it a name for us. Thanks. I have a Southern English accent. I think that's probably as far as I can go on that one. I come from Hampshire, which is in the southeast of England, if that helps. So that's what my accent is. Which probably makes me, to other English people, they would consider me generic Southern, but yeah, I come from Hampshire. Thank you. Nightmare is saying, I always thought Robert sounded like Philip Schofield. That's a very English reference, but yeah, many people have said that. Philip Schofield is a TV presenter in the UK. Let's go with a question from Jared over on Patreon saying, when in doubt, blame Bloodraven. Well, not so fast. You have stated your case very well. I might add that Bloodraven guided a long-term plan of action that distilled the magic of every major house in Westeros into one perfect bloodline in order to bring about the return of Azor Ahai and end a second long night. Good summary of some of my videos. While this may be true, I want to know who you believe is guiding his actions. Is it the blood and fire magic of old Valyria? Is it the magic of the Children of the Forest and the Weirwood Network? Is it the ambiguous pool of magic from which all the major religions pull their power? It seems he is the pawn of some entity, but who is? But who? Okay, so he's not a pawn. I think he is a magic user in and of himself. I think that through his life, he was doing what he thought was right for the kingdom, for the realms of men. Once he got hooked up to the Weirwood Network, that's the point at which he was then very much working on their behalf. So he is very much hooked into the Weirwood Network, the magic, the old magic of Westeros, and I think that is what is driving his actions all of this time. His own personal magic that he brings into this is definitely part of First Men magic, but also part Valyrian magic. So what we've got is this injection into the Weirwood Network of a slightly more Valyrian slant, but he is still very much working on behalf of the Weirwood Network, is my personal take. Robin Blackwood saying Gloucestershire represent. Well, welcome Gloucestershire. Always good to have you here. Question from Lily Mellon. I was wondering who within the Targaryen family line that we've heard about would you say are truly good rulers? We've often listened to you consider this theme or debate in regards to Aegon. What of the original three heads of the dragon? What of Dany? What of the many names in between? Okay, so who were the actually good Targaryen rulers? Well, we often hear about Jaehaerys and Alicent. Now we get a slightly Hagorific view of them through Fire and Blood, and they definitely did do good things. So the Targaryens, having invaded, they had a couple of weak and cruel rulers after Aegon, and then Jaehaerys takes over with Alicent. I think it's fair to call them co-rulers in a way. And they do a lot of good stuff. It's undeniable. The kind of things that aren't particularly sexy or exciting, they built the roads, the King's Road and various other roads. They spent money on making sure that the people had what they needed. They built up King's Landing. They did a lot of actually good stuff. They Alicent banned the right of the first night, which was a cruel and callous right for lords to basically rape people. So there was a lot of good stuff that they did. But we have to balance that against the fact that Jaehaerys did create or establish, first of all, the idea of male preference primogeniture, so basically saying women can't rule. Secondly, he created this idea of Targaryen exceptionalism, which is the idea that the Targaryens are better than everyone else. Yes, Targaryen apologists would say that's not what it was about, but really it was. It was saying, you know what, the Valyrians are not subject to Faith of the Seven. Everyone else is. Everyone else has to follow their rules. We do not have to follow their rules because we're different and better. So Jaehaerys was in many ways a good king, but he wasn't a perfect king. Aegon, if I had to pick one king who was probably trying their best to do good, it probably is Aegon V. He was definitely trying his best. The lords of the land were starting to get a bit concerned about him because he was definitely trying to help the small folk. He'd spent so long with Dunk touring the small folk that he was on their side, and frankly the lords of the land were starting to get a little bit nervous that maybe their place in society, which was theirs by birth, not by who they were or anything else, it was just because their parents had been powerful, therefore they were powerful and everyone else wasn't powerful. They were starting to get nervous because of the reforms that Aegon V started to bring about. Now, towards the end of his reign, he went the way of many Targaryens and got very obsessed by dragons and hatching eggs and all the rest of it. So, again, he wasn't perfect. But in terms of good kings, he was definitely right up there. Girl Nettles, just for fun, kill, marry, shag. Oh, don't do this to me. Alicent, Dany, and Shira Seastar. Well, you have to marry Alicent because she's great. You have to shag Shira Seastar So sorry, Dany. I've got a few haters after that one. Thank you. That put me on the spot. Don't do that to me again. Thank you. Sorry, and thank you for the super chat. I should probably say. Andrew K saying kill Shira before she kills you. Yeah, that's probably fair. Okay, so let's go to a question from Lou Kernock saying, I've always wondered why Lyanna, an apparently strong and fit young woman, died in childbirth. I've got a couple of ideas why, and I'd love your opinion. Did Lyanna have twins? If so, could young Griff in fact be Jon's brother, or could Lyanna also have given birth to a child that didn't survive? I think the short answer to this is that back in medieval times, dying in childbirth was normal. There didn't have to be a particular reason for it. Lots of women died in childbirth. And in the world of Ice and Fire, we see it happen again and again and again and again. George R. R. Martin was, if we want to put a grand word for it, he was foreshadowing the idea that women can die in childbirth or after childbirth. So I don't personally think that there has to be a reason for this. The idea that there were twins or something like that, it's not necessary. It doesn't have to be a complicated birth. They did not have modern medicine. They didn't, and Lyanna was not there having a gazillion people look after her. They were on the run. They were in this tower, hidden away. They probably had a maester, but that's probably it. The fact that there were complications should not be a big thing for us. Okay, so let's take a moment, as I do roughly halfway through all of my live streams, just take a moment to let you know what's coming up on this channel. I think I said this time last week that I was working on a video about how big is the Winds of Winter going to be, and I think I joked that, ironically, it seems to be a larger video than I'd anticipated, and it's taking me longer than I'd anticipated. That's definitely still the case. I'm still working on it. I've written it, I've recorded it, but I've still got to do a little bit of extra work on it, so it hopefully will come this week. The How Big is the Winds of Winter video, and the short answer, spoiler alert, is very big. It's going to be a massive book. George R. R. Martin has told us this already, but it's a matter of how big. What I'm trying to do in that video is trying to work out the plots that we know. We're reasonably clear on a lot of the story of the Winds of Winter. We don't know every twist and turn, but we're reasonably clear on the outlines of it. On the basis of that story, how many chapters has it got, and what does that mean in terms of the size of the book? So that's what I'm doing with that video. The other things that are coming, the Lord of the Rings content is going to keep coming. I'm currently doing a video per week on that. Sometimes I'm even doing 2 videos per week. I had my biggest hit for a long time, actually, recently. If you're a Lord of the Rings fan or not a Lord of the Rings fan, then if you've not checked it out already, last week I did a video on Tolkien's unfinished sequel to the Lord of the Rings, because yes, he did start writing a sequel to the Lord of the Rings. He didn't get very far, it has to be said, but he thought it through and tried to figure out what this sequel would be about. If that intrigues you, then please do go and check out on the channel my my Lord of the Rings content. Other than that, I'm carrying on my conversation with other content creators. I talked to Voice of Geekdom. If you've never come across his channel, please do check it out. We went through the Silmarillion at a high level. If you've ever thought, you know what, or even tried reading the Silmarillion, and it's a little bit much, and just wanted an overview, if you want to know what is in the Silmarillion but didn't want to read the whole thing, this is the video for you. We just work our way through. There's 5 parts to the Silmarillion, and we just let you know what's in each part. So if that's interesting to you, then please do go and check this out. Okay, so I think that's me caught up on the chat comments. Andrew, Susan Dunkel saying love the partnership videos. Good. I'm really pleased you do. I love having extra people coming in here, providing a slightly different perspective, and all the rest. Carl Karsnak saying epic deep dive into the Silmarillion. It's about an hour long, but will give you a great intro into the book as a whole. Good. Well, that was what I was hoping from that video. It has to be said. I just wanted an overview of it, about an hour, just to allow people to understand what is in the Silmarillion. Let's do a few more questions from my patrons. Catherine Furseth saying, hi Robert, House Targaryen is not my favourite, I must confess. Too much take what is mine with fire and blood stuff. Not much talk of the common good. Their house seems extremely entitled as a whole. My question is this. In your opinion, what are the strong or most redeeming, aka good qualities of House Targaryen? What, if anything, makes them worthy rulers in your view? I don't know whether I would say there's something that applies for all of the Targaryens. I think some Targaryens are good, some are less good. George R. R. Martin, as we know, loves reveling in the grey. So I don't think he particularly wants us to think of House Targaryen as morally better or worse than any other house. But what, in terms of the house characteristics, what might make them a good ruler, I think there clearly is a magical thing going on there. So some of them do have this kind of link in with prophetic visions and all the rest of it. So that clearly is something to their benefit. They clearly all view themselves as rulers, and therefore are willing to take the hard decisions that being a ruler requires. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll make the right hard decisions, but I think that they are happy to make the decisions. There are only a couple of really weak rulers in the sense of people who aren't willing to make decisions. Targaryens as a whole are willing to make decisions, which is one of the most important things in terms of leaders. So I think that's probably as far as I would go. I think, yes, they're magic-y. When they had dragons, they could only be the rulers. There's no one else. You couldn't have a second most important house who had dragons. If they had dragons, they had to be in charge, because otherwise it would just be impossible to manage. They've got their magic. They've got the fact that they clearly are willing to be strong in power. And I think that's probably it. I don't think that there's anything that I would say makes them magically better than any other people, regardless of what they might say. Damon Hocking says or asks, do you think it is possible that Dark Sister is in fact Longclaw? There are theories out there that Longclaw could be Blackfire, but apparently George has said this is definitely not the case. But what about Dark Sister? The Mormonts having Valyrian steel in the first place is a bit sketchy, so could it not be a great way for Bloodraven to get Valyrian steel into the hands of John? You would have to disregard the claim that the Mormonts have had Longclaw for 500 years, though. Okay, so I think my answer to this is I've not seen any evidence that Dark Sister is Longclaw or Longclaw is Dark Sister. Other than the fact that they're both hand and half swords, they're not like powerful two-handed swords. Now, the if the idea is that Bloodraven is wanting a Valyrian steel sword to get into Jon's hands, then he did that anyway by the chain of events that led to Jon getting Longclaw, and that works equally as well if it's the ancestral sword of the Mormonts. I think the argument against this being, well, I mean, I should probably take a step back. I think the case is for people who wish to prove that this is Dark Sister rather than the other way around. I think that there's no particular evidence that it is, but if you were to argue that it is, I think you have to prove that there is a massive conspiracy going on in House Mormont, because the timings of this just they don't quite work otherwise. These things all are in living memory. Now, if you're arguing that Dark Sister has gone to House Mormont, that we know that Dark Sister was with Bloodraven at least 233, the year 233, which is when he went to the wall. We've had confirmation of that, that was when this was a Shire from History of Westeros who asked George R. R. Martin directly, and he confirmed that yes, Dark Sister went with Bloodraven to the wall, and that is the year 233. Now, Bloodraven went north of the wall in the year 252. Now, we've heard nothing in between that to suggest anything other than he took Dark Sister with him. So, what might have happened? Could he have given it to House Mormont in the meantime? I mean, he could have done, but Jeor Mormont was alive at the time, so he would presumably have given it to Jeor Mormont. And you have to, if you accept this conspiracy theory, you have to say, okay, so he gave it to Jeor Mormont and said, okay, you now have to pretend that this sword has been in your family for 500 years. And then you have to give it to Jon Snow. But that's not what happens. That's not what happens at all, because Jeor Mormont then goes up to the Night's Watch and he leaves it to his son Jorah, who clearly has got no thought. We hear what Jorah says about it several times. He clearly has no thought that this has to go to Jon Snow, that this is not an ancestral sword. He seems pretty sure that this is the family sword. All the way through, on his honor, he leaves it there when he abandons Westeros because he thinks that this is the ancestral sword and all the rest of it. So you have to accept that there is some massive cover-up the generation before Jorah. Mage Mormont, who is there and is Jeor's sister, she clearly thinks that this is the ancestral family sword. So she, by implication, must have thought that her father or her mother or whoever was ruling before Jeor had it as well. If the moment you think that this is the case, you enter into this huge conspiracy theory with not just random members of House Mormont, but members of House Mormont who we know, who we see in this story. This is all in living memory. And why do we think this is the case? Because we want to get a Valyrian steel sword into Jon's hand. Well, Jon will get one anyway. Longclaw would come into his possession anyway, even if it's not Dark Sister. No, I think that all the evidence is that Dark Sister went north of the wall with Bloodraven. It's up there in the cave with him, and I think that it will be taken back down south, probably by Meera. So that's where we're at. I would lay the burden of proof on people who suggest that it is the same rather than the other way around. There's no evidence that this is that Longclaw is Dark Sister, and that the evidence is there that based upon people's actions, that they think that this is an ancestral sword of the Mormonts. So yeah, that's where I'm at. There's simply no evidence that it is. Celia Tanner, thank you so much, saying from Robin Blackwood. Oh, this is picking up a question from someone in the chat. I love it when people do this, picking up a question from someone else in the chat. I sometimes don't spot stuff from people in the chat because it goes by very quickly. How do Mantaris fit into the Valyrian blood and mutations? Might we get more Mantaris lore since they have been allied with Yunkai? Okay, so Mantaris is a city just to the north of the Valyrian Peninsula and we don't know huge amounts about it, but they were part of the Valyrian freehold, and nowadays we get rumors. People don't go there, but we get rumors of people with mutations, people who are hugely affected by whatever happened at the Doom of Valyria. So how does this fit into Valyrian blood and mutations? Well, I think probably they were there anyway, but the Doom of Valyria is not just a physical explosion. It seems to be a magical one as well. So yes, it probably was just the killing the fire mages who were preventing the volcanoes from erupting, but the eruption in killing all of the dragons and the Valyrians, this was a magical destruction, not just a physical destruction. And that seems to, in the same way that we get sort of nuclear fallout, that seems to have had an effect around the whole area. So that's what seems to have been going on. Them allying with Yunkai, I don't think we're going to get huge amounts more on that one. I think Mantaris is one of those places that's just by the by as we go through this story. Brian Reel saying points to Robert for being a good sport with the kill, marry, shag question. You're welcome. Also, Robert, what were some of your favorite moments from Fire and Blood? Fire and Blood. I mean, I really enjoyed Fire and Blood as a book. I think there were a lot of fantastic things in there. The standout moment has to be Arya and Balerion, and that really kind of horror moment when the two of them come back from probably Valyria, which we were talking about in just a moment, and we get the fireworms underneath the skin. It's so visceral and horrible that that for me was the moment that stuck up there. In terms of other things, the writing style itself, I think, is fantastic because it all comes from the perspective of this Maester. And I love the references to Mushroom. Now, Mushroom, for those who don't know, is this effectively is a court jester. He's a dwarf. And apparently he also wrote his memoirs, which are the most scurrilous memoirs you could possibly imagine about the court and the Targaryens and all the rest of it. And at almost every turn, we get them dismissed as just being oh, no, of course, that couldn't possibly have happened. But part of you goes, maybe they did. And I love this character of Mushroom. I am so hopeful. I will come on to this in a moment as well in my questions from patrons, but I'm so hopeful we get Mushroom in this because it would be so fantastic. Such a great character. Someone who lived through 4 or 5 different monarchs and lived quite literally to tell the tale. I think that's me caught up on chat questions. Jamie McKenna, keep missing these. Apparently, I missed KMF. Can't wait to hear. Cheers, Sir Robert the Scholar White. Thank you so much. Yes, you did. You did. Someone rather cruelly put one of those in a super chat. Henry Fairburn says, I've always made the connection in my mind between the Targaryens and the Anglo-Saxon kings, given their names with an AE are present in both Aegon, Aerys, Daeron, and also Ethelred the Unready, Elfred, etc. And also that both lost their kingdoms by conquest. You didn't actually put that one as a question. It was a fantastic comment, so I just thought I'd add to this. Yes, there clearly is. The AE is something that is there in this country. Anglo-Saxon, the English pre-invasion from the Danes and then from the Normans, the Saxon kings had an AE in their name quite a lot of the time. Is that where George R. R. Martin got his inspiration from? Well, perhaps in a kind of a linguistic way, but for the Targaryens or for the Valyrians as a whole, Valyria, his inspiration seems a lot more to be based on Rome as a place. And so we get the fall of Rome and what happens in the fall of Rome. And one thing that we've not, or at least I've not seen explored as a sort of an inspiration here, is that if we accept Valyria as Rome and the Doom of Valyria as the fall of Rome, then who are the Targaryens? The Targaryens have to be who is left after the fall of Rome, which from my sort of ancient British perspective is the Romano-British. Now, what does this mean? The Romano-British are the Romans who were left in Britain after the fall of the Roman Empire. And what do? Well, they can't really go home, so they stay in Britain. But they, as the Romans, they were a technological level above everyone else. So they seem bigger and better. And this is perhaps, as many scholars suggest, this is perhaps the start of this, the myth of King Arthur and Camelot, is you have this Romano-British, the relics of the Roman Empire, who were around during the Dark Ages in Europe, who had some memories of Rome, this great cultured city. And so that for me is where we get this the Targaryen inspiration from, is from this idea of those who held the candle after the fall of Rome. And it's not just the Romano-British. The concept is true across the continent of Europe and beyond, because the Roman Empire expanded beyond. But with the Romano-British, that seems to have led to this idea of Camelot and the Knights of the Round Table and all the rest of it. So Sasak saying, wasn't the King Arthur stuff very related to the Britons who came back over from Brittany after 1066? Yes, it is, but it also, so the legends of Arthur started in the embers of the or at least the ending of the Roman rule in the UK. It has to, as is now, the coming back from Brittany, when you get the Normans after 1066. Apologies for those who are less interested in history than perhaps I am, but they brought back with them this idea, and so the Normans then became the new ruling class. And then obviously you get Mallory with La Morte d'Arthur, which is the first major Arthur legend, but that is probably encapsulating a lot of legends that are already in place. So yes, the origination of the Arthur, the written Arthur stories comes from, with a very much a French slant, but it is based upon very much what has been spoken of over centuries, it would appear, in England. Berus Aurelius, thank you so much, saying, did the Targaryens lose the knowledge of dragon breeding, or did something else happen? Loving all the great Tolkien videos. Keep crushing, Robert. Thank you so much. And I'm glad you're enjoying the Tolkien videos. In terms of the losing the knowledge of dragon breeding, so Fire and Blood, one of the things that we didn't really see the detail of this. So it told the history, but there was so much that was unsaid. And the assumption through most of Fire and Blood, when dragons were around and all the rest of it, was that you don't actually have to, there isn't a secret to dragon breeding. The dragons have eggs, they will hatch. They mostly on Dragonstone, this seems to be the way. So this is just natural, in the same way that we'd say, well, what's the secret to sheep breeding? Well, you let sheep just do the natural thing and sheep will happen. So that's the idea here, is that in Fire and Blood, it isn't an issue. How do you hatch dragons? It's just dragons will hatch from dragon eggs. So did they lose the secret? It's almost as if magic left, and so it suddenly became a lot harder to do. And they tried to do it in less obvious ways. So Dragonstone, they seem to just like allow dragons to do their thing on Dragonstone, and then they brought them to King's Landing and they sort of cooped them up in the dragon pit, and they just made it a lot harder. Added to which, there's a very clear possibility that the Maesters were poisoning the dragons. So once you do not have adult dragons, you just have these dragon eggs, it just suddenly seems to be a whole lot more complicated for them. And magic was waning in the land at the time as well. So I don't think it was that there was ever a secret that they lost. I think it's just that the world changed and dragons had gone. Jamie McKenna saying sheep will happen. Need a new merch for this. Well, dragons will happen. Let's probably better. Okay, so Stephen Dillon saying, do you think warging may play a part in how the Targaryens control their dragons? Also, he's a Targaryen, so don't mind asking, when John is resurrected, do you think he'll be more wolf-like in a generic sense, or will he be more like a ghost, specifically the wolf he spent time in while his body was dead? Okay, so is warging playing a part in how Targaryens control their dragons? No, I think it's a more genetic link there between the two, and in terms of control is probably the wrong word, because Dany can't control Drogon. Dragons are not controlled. She thinks back, how did the Valyrians control their dragons? Well, they controlled them with magical horns and all the rest of it. It's an instinctive bond between people where it happens there. Warging appears to be slightly different. Yes, you can have a bond with a particular animal, but also you can, if you have the ability to do this, then you appear, as with Varamir Six Skins, to be able to try and go in and invade somebody. That doesn't seem to be the case with what's going on with the Valyrians. Even Bran, for example, he just goes in and takes hold of Hodor. It's very invasive. It's very much a different thing that's going on there. With John, will he be more wolf-like in a generic sense, or more ghost-like? Probably more ghost-like. The information we have on what happens with skin changes with wargs when they go into their animal for a period of time is that they become like that animal. That animal is ghost, so John will become more ghost-like. That ghost is a direwolf, so yes, that's quite direwolfy, but yes, quiet, silent, more stealthy, perhaps, is one of the things that we could add into that. Morgan R.R. Hayes just saying hi. First time I've made a live stream in forever. Well, thank you so much for the super chat, and welcome back. It's great to have you here. Question from Julia Erickson saying, hi, Robert. In A Dance with Dragons, Jorah tries to explain to Tyrion why the Volantine's triarchy system might be more sane than the Westerosi monarchy. He says, whenever a madman's elected, his colleagues restrain him until his year has run its course. Think of all the dead who might still live if Mad Aerys only had 2 fellow kings to share the rule. So in other words, he is saying that if the dragon had 3 heads instead of 1, thousands of people might have survived. Do you think that this is what the phrase "the dragon must have 3 heads" is about? Okay, so yes, I think this is a really interesting point. Targaryens often are, I mean, I don't like the phrase mad or the word mad here for Targaryens. I don't think that is exactly what's going on here, but clearly Targaryens don't always turn out to be great. And Maester Aemon says a Targaryen alone in the world is a terrible thing. Now, I don't think, I mean, we often interpret that as being, it's terrible, poor Targaryen alone in the world. But perhaps we should interpret that as being, if there's a Targaryen alone in the world, then poor world, because that Targaryen has got nobody to temper them in any way. I think, yes, a triarchy works well, certainly for the Targaryens, and I think Jorah is definitely hinting at this. When we talk about Aegon the Conqueror, it wasn't just him who ruled. When he was off, and he went off, we're told, for half the year he wasn't there on the Iron Throne, one or other of his sisters would be ruling in his stead. This wasn't just King Aegon I. This was 3 people ruling, and that seems to be what works well for the Targaryens when there is more than one of them, Jaehaerys and Alicent working together, and so this is the way that Targaryens seem to work best, is as a team, not just as individuals. Luke Hughes in the chat saying you provide the best A Song of Ice and Fire content on YouTube. Thank you so much. Will Jon Snow have his reunion with the Starks in the same order as the show? That's an excellent question. Roughly is my answer. So on the show, Jon met Sansa first, and then we get I don't know what order the rest of them were, but he briefly met or saw Rickon before Rickon died, and then we had Bran, then Arya. That seems roughly the right order, although it is not going to be exactly the same. So I don't think Sansa is going to go up to Castle Black. I think that Jon is going to come back down from Castle Black first. Then I think Sansa is going to appear. Bran will probably appear after that. Rickon, yes, he will die. He'll be very short-lived. Arya is probably the last to appear of them all. So roughly the same order, I would say. Let's look at a few questions I've got from my patrons on the future of A Song of Ice and Fire. Specifically, I think a lot of these are about Jon and Daenerys. But let's look at. Oh, Donald People saying, I think you missed my super chat. I do apologize. Let me scroll back, see if I can. I did. Thank you for pointing it out. Donald Peoples, thank you. Your thoughts on Targaryen involvement in the Doom? They never carry over or revive Valyrian culture or practices and seem to be okay with the loss. They even actively prevent the rise of a new Valyria. Yeah, I did pick up on this a moment ago. I don't think that they were directly involved, because how do they gain? I think this is the main argument I have against the idea that they were involved. I mean, you could say, yeah, okay, fine, they survived. That's how they gained. But the people themselves who were there, we're looking at the Targaryen family who were there at the time. How did they benefit from this? They didn't. They stayed on Dragonstone. They didn't do anything. That's if this was some master plan by the Targaryens to destroy all of their enemies within the Valyrian freehold, what then? I mean, they don't get anything. They don't try and invade Essos. They don't try and invade Westeros. They don't do anything. They don't achieve anything other than sit there and have a diminishing number of dragons until they attack Westeros 100 years later, several generations later. So no, I understand why people might think that the Targaryens were involved in this, but actually, how do they benefit? They don't, is the short answer to all of this. So in terms of actively preventing the rise of a new Valyria, I don't think in their new position, I don't think that they would want Valyria to rise again, because suddenly they're in huge, they're in this position of monopoly. They're the only ones with dragons and all the rest of it, so they don't want anyone challenging them. But that I don't think that necessarily means that they were involved in what happened before. Just because they're opportunistic based on the new situation doesn't mean that they were involved in creating that. Lily Mellon saying, you were just talking about John being more ghost-like after walking, and Beric is said to be foreshadowing it. So do you think John will forget Ygritte? So Beric is foreshadowing the fact that someone can come back from the dead and still be roughly them. So this is what George R. R. Martin was saying. Every time Beric comes back, he forgets a little bit more about his former life. Now, does this mean because Beric specifically forgets his love, does this mean that John will specifically forget his love? Possibly. It would certainly make it easier for him then to fall in love with Dany. I think that the main point here, though, is that John's resurrection is not going to be specifically like Beric's. He's going to go into Ghost, stay in Ghost, and then be called back into his own body, which had previously been frozen, rather than Beric, who he and his body had died, and then it was brought back, and the gap there was what caused the loss of memories and all the rest of it. So John is a different case. Yes, Beric provided foreshadowing, but it's not the template, which is a specific it's a fine detail. But just because one thing happened to Beric does not mean that the exact same thing is going to be happening to John. That said, yeah, maybe he will forget a little bit about Ygritte. That would certainly that would certainly help ease his way into the romance, which surely is coming with Daenerys. Mara Lee talking about in previous live streams, you talked about the physical symbols of Targaryen rule. For example, Aegon's crown, Blackfire, Dark Sister. What role or roles do you see these three symbols playing in the upcoming prequel House of the Dragon, as well as in the last two A Song of Ice and Fire books? So the main role of the Targaryen symbols of rulership, which are things like the Iron Throne, as you say, Blackfire, the crown, is that these seem to add some kind of authority to whoever it is who claims the throne, because there will be lots of people claiming the throne. Specifically, Aegon will, I suspect, gather around himself all of the accoutrements of Targaryen power. He will sit on the Iron Throne. He will create a Kingsguard that is reminiscent of the Kingsguard of King Aerys, the last Targaryen king. He will get the Targaryens had many different crowns for different kings, but one of those crowns, I'm sure, will appear, and he will be crowned with it. And Blackfire, the ancestral sword of the kings of the Targaryen kings of Westeros, will be given to him. So I think that is the main role that those things will play in the books, that they will be there showing or appearing to support the claim of Aegon. That is the point there. In terms of what they will play in, what role those things will play in House of the Dragon, I think it's exactly the same. People will claim there are two groupings that claim the throne, and they will try and generate whatever authority they can. There comes a point in the Dance of the Dragons when Rhaenyra sits on the Iron Throne, and she claims the Iron Throne. That was written out of the history of the Targaryen monarchs, when you actually had a queen sat on the throne. But she did. She was there for a long time. The Sword of Blackfire is definitely another one of those things that people will be using within the House of the Dragon to be showing that they are the rightful ruler. So look out for these things, that they are the things that people claim as proof that they are the rightful ruler. Larahu Dinalankara saying, "Hi Robert, me again. What do you think of those worms in the princess's tummy? Any more to come in the books? Very Alien/Prometheus Lovecraft-like to me. This is Arya, who returned from Valyria on top of Balerion the dragon and had fireworms crawling underneath her skin and all the rest of it. What do I make of it? I make of it that this is that she and Balerion just went to Valyria and discovered all of the horrors that are there, and they burrowed into her and under her skin and all the rest of it. Do you think that there's any more to come? I hope not. I suspect not. I think George R. R. Martin did that just to remind us quite how scary Valyria is, quite how people shouldn't be going there, because we get Euron in the books going to Valyria, and without that reminder we might think, yeah, okay, so he went to Valyria. But now with this reminder, we think, okay, did he really go there? If he did, that's quite huge. There's a lot. He must have overcome a lot in order to do that, and that builds on this idea of Euron being both crazy and brilliant at the same time. So I don't think we're going to see more of it. I think this is just George R. R. Martin giving us a reminder of quite how horrific it is now in the Smoking Sea and Old Valyria. Okay. Question from Dolorous Alex saying, we don't know for sure what Aegon's true parentage is. If it is revealed that he is actually a Blackfire or Illyrio's son, what do you think will be his reaction? Will he, for example, continue with his conquest of Westeros? I'm not sure it will ever be made 100% clear, is the short answer. George R. R. Martin doesn't deal in these absolutes. He doesn't deal in that, okay, suddenly we now know that he's not this. it will probably carry on being reasonably clear to most people that he isn't who he claims to be. And Daenerys is one of her visions in the House of the Undying is about being this revealer of lies. So she's the person who is probably going to be showing that he is a liar in this. I don't think he will ever reach the point where he goes, wow, I'm not who I thought I was, therefore I'm going to stop doing this. I don't think that's ever going to be there. I think he will carry on believing he is who he has been told he is right to the end of his days. And then it's up to others to disprove that point. So I think that I don't think he's going to ever be faced with incontrovertible evidence. It's just going to be people like Dany who are faced with evidence that shows that he isn't who he claims to be, which is a potential reason for Sir Barristan to survive all the way through to that time, because he was there at the time, and he will have seen the dead body, or at least heard reports of the dead body. Yeah, it's almost certain that he will be telling Daenerys that this is not true. Okay, so the second sister says, can you tell us your thoughts about Maester Aemon's ramblings at the end of his life? Yes, I'm happy to tell you my thoughts on Maester Aemon's ramblings. So Maester Aemon, he headed south in the books. He headed south with Sam to go to Old Town. He didn't make it. He died along the way. And in his last chapter, or his last couple of chapters, Sam's last couple of chapters, then we read of what Maester Aemon was saying, and it seems that he started getting slightly more prophetic visions, or thoughts at least. I've copied a few of them down here. This is what he says. He says, I see them in my dreams, Sam. I see a red star bleeding in the sky. I still remember red. I see their shadows on the snow. This is dragons, obviously. Hear the crack of leathern wings. Feel their hot breath. My brothers dreamed of dragons too, and the dreams killed them, every one. Sam, we tremble on the cusp of half-remembered prophecies, of wonders and terrors that no man now living could hope to comprehend. I should have... And then later he says, I should not have left the wall. Lord Snow could not have known, but I should have seen it. Fire consumes, but cold preserves. The wall... but it is too late to go running back. So he has dreams of dragons is the first thing that we have to pull out from this, which he'd not previously had. And that seems fair and normal. He's a Targaryen, and then dragons come back into the world. Him having dreams of dragons seems fair. The thing which draws my eye in all of this is this thing about Lord Snow. So he's talking about John, and he says, I should not have left the wall. John could not have known, but I should have seen it. So that, to me, implies that Aemon suddenly understood John's heritage. John could not have known, but I should have seen it. What should he have seen? He shouldn't have seen it. He's blind. But he should have appreciated something. What is it about Aemon that he should have understood about John that no one else should have been able to understand about John? Aemon is a Targaryen. He should have recognized another Targaryen. So that's what's going on here, is that Aemon realizes who John is. He doesn't actually say it. He's a very, very old man. He doesn't actually say it to Sam in as much. Other than this, John could not have known, but Aemon should have seen it. Fire consumes, but cold preserves. We get this fire and ice idea. And then he says the wall, but it is too late to go running back. So he's basically saying, I should have figured stuff out while I was there. I should have figured out what was happening, but we're going this way now. It's too late. I can't go back. That is what is the sort of the message of Maester Aemon all the way through, is that he's figured stuff out. He has understood what was going on when he was there, but now he realizes he can't go back. And tragically, perhaps, he never tells Sam exactly what it was that he figured out. Jaharis Stargathista saying, thanks for earlier. You're welcome. Next question. Who will ride the dragons? Euron instead of a Night King? Question mark. Yeah, excellent question. So who's going to ride the dragons? We've got one dragon rider already in Daenerys riding Drogon. I still like this idea of John riding Rhaegal, the dragon that's named after his father. That works for me. I think that also confirms his Targaryenness. But who will ride the other? On the show, obviously, this was the Night King who rode it. We don't have a similar character so far. We don't have a similar character in the books, so that doesn't really seem to make sense. Might Euron ride the dragon? Actually, that's quite persuasive. Euron is trying to capture a dragon. He is clearly hugely magical and trying to perform huge magic. Viserion, named after Viserys, is the dragon that will be ridden by someone else. Now, the balance worked well on the show in terms of you get pure ice with Viserion, pure fire with Dany on Drogon, and then John being the balance of ice and fire. I do wonder whether Euron will be the one to be riding Viserion. There are so many kind of like bits of Fire and Blood, and the World of Ice and Fire had so many kind of bits of imagery about one-eyed people riding dragons and all the rest of it, particularly coming up to Harrenhal. That's my current favorite, unless we get more from the White Walkers from the others in the books that give us a character. But I think that Daenerys is not going to go that far north that quickly. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that Euron will probably remain the sort of the second threat, and he is probably the most likely to do that. Anime lover Nicole, hi there, saying, who is your favorite Targ in the dance? Mine is Nettles and Jace. My headcanon is that she is Daemon's daughter. Yeah, I think that's reasonable headcanon. Daemon Targaryen, for me, I love him. Love a bad boy. I think he's all the Daemon Targaryens are great. And this one is right up there for me. Nettles, definitely. You have to love Nettles as a character who is slightly separate to the Targaryens, and yet clearly in there with the Valyrian magic. Daemon Targaryen is the kind of character who is a protagonist wherever he goes, and I cannot wait for the casting for this character. He has to be involved in the casting for House of the Dragon. He's too good a character not to. Yeah, so he is there. He's involved all the way through this story. He goes off. He's so charismatic, he has to be pushed away from King's Landing. He has romantic liaisons with so many different people. He is a really, really good and strong character. So I would definitely go there. In terms of, you asked for favorite Targ, I mean, the character I'm most looking forward to is Mushroom, who's not a Targaryen, but I'm really looking forward to. DJ and Diamstat are saying, what do you think attacked Balerion and Valyria? I think it's the whatever is left. So the Valyrians, they were doing lots of experimenting with hybrids and all the rest of it. They were trying to create new things all the time. And I think that whatever survived, in fact, sorry, to take a step back, when we hear of the mines of Valyria, underneath Valyria, and you get all the slaves there who are mining away, occasionally they would break through a wall, and in the sulfur, in the heat of the volcanoes, with the magma and all the rest of it, there would be monsters. There would be worms with eyes, and this is the kind of thing which will have survived the Doom. The only things which will have survived the Doom will be things that are okay with hugely hot temperatures, and so that is what has survived. So in Valyria now, almost certainly are the results of the Valyrian genetic experiments. Worms with eyes, worms that are half dragon, half human, wyverns, huge amounts of things like that. We don't know all the details of it, but we do know that they're horrific. So that is what it is that attacked Balerion in Valyria. Stephen Dillon saying, do you think that Jace versus Syrah really happened? I had a theory that the pregnant girl in Bran's vision at the end of A Dance with Dragons is Syrah, first Stark, or Sarah, sorry, I should say, Targ hybrid. So this is a story which is in Fire and Blood, and I think also in the World of Ice and Fire, this idea. So we get Jace Targaryen, Velaryon, I can't completely remember his surname, to be honest, but he goes up to Winterfell to try and enlist the help of the Starks. While he's there, allegedly has an affair with Sarah. Allegedly they have children, and also allegedly the dragon lays eggs that allegedly stay in Winterfell down by the hot springs. There's a lot of allegedly that goes on. What we can be pretty sure of is that yes, he did visit Winterfell, and that this led to, eventually it led to the Starks heading all the way down south at the end of the Dance of the Dragons. But are there any Targaryen children up there? Possibly. I don't think, this is now many generations later, I don't think that this is going to have any impact on the main story we've got going on there. They will have intermarried several times, and we're talking quite a few generations later. The thing we have to remember with the Targaryens is that lots of them slept with lots of people and had lots of bastard children all over the place. So for the Valyrian blood that we think of as this bloodline as being so pure, it's all over the place, let's face it. Might there be some Valyrian half-quarter, 8th, 16th Valyrian children in the north? Yes, definitely. That seems absolutely fair and right and proper. And so, yes, I got absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. Making a Stark Targaryen hybrid, yes, but not the one that was promised, is the short answer there, I suspect. Let's go to a question from Ali Cat saying, "Hi Robert, this is my first ever question, and you on Patreon, so you're saying you only recently become a patron but have been watching my videos for a while. Well, welcome. This is one of the advantages of being a patron, is that your question gets priority on these live streams. You're saying they're great to watch while you're drawing, and I love to hear it, what people do while they're watching my videos. It's slightly off topic, but what do you think will happen to Daario? I do not imagine Dany is going to leave him in charge of anywhere. Do you think he will live? And if he dies, how do you think that will affect her? This is an interesting one because we don't have much to go on here. What we do know is that, yes, Dany will leave Meereen. She will head off with the people that she thinks will be useful to her in invading Westeros. And I suspect that Daario is not one of those people. So the other thing we know probably is that she will not want to leave Meereen. As she left Yunkai and Astapor, she left both of them without really anyone she trusted in control, and both of them just basically reverted. Yunkai went back to their previous masters. Astapor, a new despot, came in. So I suspect that what she's going to do is think, okay, what am I going to do with Meereen? I need to leave somebody in charge who I trust. Now, that could be Daario. If she's convinced by someone like Tyrion that, yes, she does have to marry someone in Westeros, it's entirely possible she will come back from the Dothraki. She's slightly more Targaryen-y, slightly more focused on winning Westeros, and so slightly more open to the idea that she can't just take her lover with her. She has to find someone over there to marry for political gain. So might she leave Daario? Yes. Might she leave him in charge of Meereen? Possibly. The fact that she left him there on the show, we shouldn't take as fact for the books, but I think we should take as fact that she will leave someone she trusts there. Now, there are a lot more characters in the books that weren't on the show. Maybe she will leave someone like the Shave Pate. Whether she trusts him or not is a different matter, but he was sort of on her side in terms of getting rid of slavery and all the rest of it. So maybe, I don't know. It's the kind of thing that, will Daario be left behind? Yes, I think he will. Will he be left in charge of Meereen? It's about 50-50 as far as I'm concerned. It's possible, but you're right, he doesn't come across as being a natural stay-at-home and rule kind of person. Andrea Gello saying, theory, the dragon must have 3 heads has nothing to do with dragon riders. Dragons as animals were dead, and instead it has to do with the rulers of Westeros, mirrors Aegon, and keeps North and Dawn involved. Okay. Yeah, so I think this... yes, I think that we shouldn't take this literally as some kind of magical formula. Is where I would go with this one. The dragon must have 3 heads is the thing that we hear Rhaegar say, and that seems to be based on the 3-headed dragon on the sigil of House Targaryen, which is in turn seemingly based on the original Targaryen conquerors. And you get Rhaegar trying to recreate those original 3 conquerors in the names of his children. The first 2 of his children he names after Rhaenys and Aegon. So he seems to be trying to name his children after those original 3. And when he says the dragon must have 3 heads, he's effectively saying, I need one more child in order to complete this triumvirate that I've got going on here. So that's what's going on there. I don't think this is a magical thing, and so the Stark, there must always be a Stark in Winterfell. I've spoken about several times. This is an so that the Starks can carry on being buried in the crypts of Winterfell, which is where the true magic is going on there. Question from Mara Lee saying, will Dany and her dragons play any role in defeating the others like they did on the show? Yes, I think they will. I don't think it will be the same as in the show. The whole episode, Beyond the Wall episode, if you remember it, when you get the team of 7 going north, and then you get them caught on that island, and Dany going north on the dragon, and then the Night King throwing the spear, all of that we have got confirmation was made up by the showrunners. That isn't something that George R. R. Martin has said. They have said as much. This is not happening in the books. So forget that idea of Daenerys going all the way to the north and north of the wall and all the rest of it. But I don't think that means that she won't have a part to play in the war. So we've already had her having one vision or dream of her on a dragon flying across the Trident, and it starts out with her thinking this is about Rhaegar, but actually the people that she's facing are the undead. So that seems to be slightly foreshadowy, and builds into this idea that actually the big battle, yes, there will be a big battle up at Winterfell, but the others will descend further south. They will get to this nexus of Westeros, which seems to be the Isle of Faces and Harrenhal and the crossroads of the Ruby Ford and all the rest of it. That area there, that seems to be where the heart of all of this is going on. So will she be involved? Yes, I think she will, but not in the same way. Jake Grice saying, hi, Robert. I hope you are well. Thank you. I am. I am currently rereading A Dance with Dragons, and it seems to me a big chunk of Dany's POV is spent deliberating over her love of Daario versus marrying the noble Hisdar to save Meereen. This appears is her main worry for roughly 2 chapters, despite an ever-growing army at her gate. George R. Martin rarely wastes a word, so do you think this is foreshadowing a future Dany, Fagon, John love triangle? My thoughts are that this time we might get a reverse of her choices in that she marries for love, John, rather than the realm, Fagon, and ultimately leads to her doom at the pointy end of John's dagger. I read all of the question out because I think it's a fascinating line of argument. I like it, but I think that the idea that John is love, not duty, is perhaps not entirely right here. So Fagon, I think what is going to happen, broadly speaking, is that Fagon, she will expose Fagon for being a lie. This is totally in line with what we seem to be seeing from her visions from the House of the Undying, is that she is going to be exposing lies. John is going to be the most logical marital choice for her. If she wishes to take the 7 kingdoms, what do we have going on? Well, John, if he is the king of the north or whatever equivalent he is up there, plus he has links across to the Vale, he has links across to the Riverlands, he is the most eligible person for her to be marrying. So that makes sense. So if I had to bet, she will deal with Fagon, Aegon, she will expose him as a liar, as not the person he claims to be, and then there's going to come the magical love affair with John. Mara Lee says, on the show, when John told Dany about his parentage, she was visibly upset, especially since it changed John's feelings about her when he learned she was his aunt. Will that happen in the books? Yeah, so I think that they will discover this. I think that John will be shaken by this. I think she won't be worried by the relationship. She was brought up to believe that she was going to be marrying her brother. So the idea that, he's or she's technically his aunt, I don't think that's a problem for her. The fact that he might theoretically be ahead of her in the line of succession might be an issue for her. I think that seemed to be what was going on in the show, was that, and from her perspective, she spent her entire life after Viserys died fixated on this idea that she is the last remaining Targaryen and she is the heir to the Iron Throne. She has to do everything she can in order for her to be inheriting. To suddenly discover that actually she's not the heir, that would be a big deal for her. So I think that would be a problem for her, and I think that he, having been brought up as a good Stark boy, will indeed have problems with her being his aunt. So yes, I think we are going to get broad, as often is the case with the show. The broad outlines are there. The detail is probably not right, or at least the length of the journey is not right. We are going to have the two of them falling in love. And at some point, it's going to become apparent what their relationship is, and that will cause friction between them. For her, because she realizes this means that she's not the heir to the throne that she thought she was, and for him, because it means that technically she's his aunt, and that's a little bit. So, yeah, that's what I think is going on. Beza Merkanzade, apologies for probably mispronouncing your name, saying, "Hi Robert, if the house with the red door and the lemon tree is in Westeros, and in particular within Dorne, then does it change Dany's parentage story?" Well, I mean, I think it could possibly do that, but I think the evidence for this being in Braavos is overwhelming. I've done a video on it. If you're interested, Google for Dany Red Door Lemon Tree, whatever. You'll find it. The house with the red door and the lemon tree makes sense. She thinks she went to Braavos. So in order for us to believe that this is somewhere else, we have to believe that she's been completely misled all this time. Yes, she was a child, but that's still quite a big conspiracy. Why on earth would Viserys be telling her all of that? The house bears all the hallmarks of being in the gardens of the Sea Lord's palace. We're told that the marriage contract that was signed between Viserys and Arianne Martell was witnessed by the Sea Lord of Braavos. We're given random details like the wood beams having animal faces on them, which is something that the Sea Lord of Braavos is that's one of the things that they have going on there. That's the sides of their barge has got animal faces on, and there's a menagerie of lots of animals in the garden of the Sea Lord of Paris. We get told that Oberyn brought with him seeds from a lemon tree, so the idea that the lemon tree is there in Braavos is absolutely right and true. The idea that trees and the like do not grow in Braavos, it all stops because the rest of the sentences, except for the gardens of the rich and powerful, which the Sea Lord is. So everything points to this being the case, that she was in fact in Braavos. I see absolutely no evidence for her being in Dorne. The lemon tree seems to be the only thing that people cling to, is this idea that lemon trees grow in Dorne. Yes, they do, but we know that Oberyn brought across the seeds, and so that makes sense that they're also in Braavos. So I wouldn't want to go down the rabbit hole of what if she were brought up in Dorne. There's absolutely no evidence of it. Why on earth would suddenly they be chucked out from Dorne? after 4 or 5 years, what reason is there? There's no reason for them to be chucked out if they were in hiding there. In Braavos, there's every reason. A change of Sea Lord is a huge political moment, and then suddenly it makes less political sense for them. Once Robert Baratheon is settled in power, there's less political sense for them to be hiding the Targaryens. DJ Diampstat saying, do you think Dany will go mad? That's a very big question. I did a video on this with my thinking about her mindset on the show. I am going to do a video at some point soon with what I think is my new perspective on this. The short answer is go mad is the wrong thing. She's not going to go mad. But I think that there is something slightly more subtle and nuanced going there. Will she be trying to retake Westeros by fire and blood? Yes, she will. I don't think there's any doubt whatsoever that she will be burning people. Let's not mince our words on that one. She will be burning people. That is what she's going to do. The only question is whether or not she burns King's Landing. And if so, we have to have a reason for that. The reasons on the show were maybe, but I think that there's something else going on here that we perhaps have underplayed a little bit, let's put it that way, that I'm going to try and bring out in my next video. Jay Chef, thank you so much, saying Aegon the Third seems to come to his own at the end of Fire and Blood 1. What do you think about his upcoming reign in Volume 2? I am intrigued by him. Yeah, he does a little bit. So Aegon the Third is often not really talked about, but he after the Dance with the Dragons, the family could have fallen. The entire continent was riven by distrust one of another, and it actually required. I mean, Aegon the Third isn't probably what you would immediately think of as a strong king, but it required a strong ruler to actually hold things together and pull everyone together after all of that. So I'm personally, a fan is probably the wrong way of saying it, but in terms of establishing and keeping the rule of the Targaryens after everything that happened, yes, you have to give a lot of credit for that. His upcoming reign in Volume 2 is it's not going to be hugely long, but important in moving forward as the Targaryens towards the more important kings that we've got coming forward afterwards. Lethian C, thank you so much, £10, saying, hi, I never donated to anyone before. I just wanted to thank, well, thank you so much. I just want to thank you. You helped me through dark times, and the future seems to be brighter since I discovered you. Thank you. That means a lot. I do this for so many reasons, but probably the biggest reason I do this is impacting on people's lives, and every now and then I get messages from people telling me how my videos have helped them through dark times, and that means huge amounts to me. So thank you. I really appreciate that, Lethian C. That's every blessing to you. I hope you you do indeed have a brighter future as well. Thank you. Let's get another question from one of my patrons. Fedra the Beloved, saying, one thing I'd love to hear your thoughts on is, it's been implied in the book and shown in the show that Dany and John will have a romance of some kind. Thinking about Drogo and Daario, it seems that Dany is attracted to bad boys, for lack of a better term. That's not what I see in John at all. From my memory, he is often described as a stick in the mud by most people who meet him, stoic, serious, etc. From your perspective, how will their romance play out? Yeah, I think this is really intriguing. So she seems to be attracted to leaders of men, good fighters, definitely. And John fits the bill on both of those. Not exclusively. Dany, as many characters in A Song of Ice and Fire, appears to be bisexual, or at least with hints of that. But in terms of sort of the men that she wants to be with, John, yes, is a little bit serious and a little bit, as you say, stick in the mud. But let's not forget that by the time she meets him, he will have been through what we've already talked about a little bit in this live stream. He will have been through this death experience where he walks into ghost his direwolf and then stays there for a while before being hauled back. And everything we know says that this means that he will become more wolfish. So if we're worried that he might be a little bit dull, a little bit, he's going to be more wolfish. So that, if anything, if you're looking for the bad boy in John, this is what's going to bring him out. He's going to be more dangerous. He's going to be more loner as well as more pack at the same time. I think that this is going to make him slightly less stick in the muddish. So the John that she meets is not going to be the slightly nerdy John that we meet in books 1 and 2, for example. Ariel Winchester, do you think that John or Dany will have a child at the end, or do you think the Winds of Winter will be the end of the Targaryens and therefore the end of Dragon Riders and Valyrians? I don't think that they will have a child between them. I think that Daenerys will die at the end of this story. I think that John will something similar to the show. He will head away from Westeros, having played his role in saving it, as it were, from ice and fire. I think that he will not be able to stay and appreciate the fruits of his labor. I think he's going to Frodo-like head away and be gone out of this world. So I think that is where he's going to be, which means no Targaryens left. I think that is the natural end to this story, is that we're going to have dragons are going to be gone from Westeros, Targaryens are going to be gone from Westeros, Whites and the White Walkers, the others, are going to be gone from Westeros, and that is the situation I think we're going to find ourselves in. Dolores Alex connected to this, saying, do you think that Dany's dragons will eventually breed? They all have male names, but we know that dragons do not have a fixed gender, so it could be possible. Yeah, this is one of the things that Septon Bath was talking about, is the idea that dragons don't seem to be just male or female. They seem to be able to shift gender in a way that we perhaps don't fully understand. But will they breed? Again, I don't think they're long enough for this world, is my take on it. I think that perhaps Drogon will escape as he did on the show, but I think the others will die, and I don't think that we're going to have any dragon babies. Maybe there will be a kind of like a Hollywoodish, and there's some dragon eggs going on there. Are they going to hatch? We don't know. But we're not going to end with any dragons in Westeros, is my prediction. I think that we're going to end with all the dragons gone. Reflective Rambling, thank you so much for the super chat, saying just overtime pay, thanks. And gentle dog stroke Dan cameo promise reminder. Dan, he's gone upstairs again. Sorry, I mean if you ever see me yawn during a live stream, then Dan gets tired a lot quicker than I do, and Dan is gone well before I go on. I mean, UK time, I start doing this at 10 p.m. So Dan, when he hits 8 or 9, That's it. He's a greyhound. They're very, and I say this with love, they're very lazy dogs. So he takes himself up to bed before this. When I next do a live stream during more sociable hours, then I will try and make sure that Dan does make an appearance. Till then, if you check out my Instagram, then you will see various pictures of him, because I do try and take them. Or my Facebook. For those who want to follow me on social media, I'm on Instagram. I think I don't know. Look for Deep Geek. You'll find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. If you are looking for that. Got just a few more questions, 6 or 7 more questions about these are other random things connected to House Targaryen. So Mara Lee starting out. Robert, can you remind us for the prequel, House of the Dragon, where in Targaryen history will the show begin? Where in Targaryen history will the prequel conclude? Do you think the show will conclude with the murder of the Mad King, the start of Robert's Rebellion? Do you think we'll get to see the backstory of Dany's 3 dragons? What about Alyssa Farman and Mushroom? Okay, so we haven't been told how long this show is going to go on for. So we don't know all the details of this, is the short answer. But we've been told that this is about the Dance of the Dragons and the build up to the Dance of the Dragons. So season 1 is almost certainly going to be the build up to the Dance of the Dragons. What that means is we probably won't see Alyssa Farman, Jaehaerys Targaryen. We might see the end of Jaehaerys Targaryen, but not any of the stuff that happens before that point. I would have thought they probably will start us with the 2 main protagonists, Alicent Hightower and Rhaenyra Targaryen. So I think that is where we're going to start off. Where will they end it? Well, it depends on how many seasons they're given, I guess, but the logical place for them to end it is with the end of the Dance of the Dragons, rather than just carrying on through Targaryen history. So I don't think we're going to get Robert's Rebellion. We've also been told pretty categorically that we're not going to have anything from Duncan Egg at this point. George R. R. Martin has not sold the rights to Duncan Egg, and so we're not going to carry on that far into Targaryen history. So it's going to be focused around the Dance of the Dragons. I think the only question is how far before that they're going to go back to try and lay the seeds of it. Are they going to go back to the Great Council, Jaehaerys' Great Council, or are they just going to go straight into the story and hope that we can figure it out as we go along? But picking up on Mushroom, yes, definitely he will. I'm really looking forward to the character of Mushroom, and he almost certainly will be involved in this. So that's something to look forward to. Eric Og, thank you so much, saying, do you think John will become more morally ambiguous after becoming wolfish? Yes, I mean, yeah, is the short answer. Yes, he will. Being more wolfish, and I use this phrase because I think George R. R. Martin has left it slightly open for exactly how that is. The inspiration for this, I've said it before, I'm sure I will say it again, the inspiration for this, check out the Farseer trilogy, Robin Hobb's original trilogy in the sort of the epic Farseer series. The main character does go through a very, very, very similar fate to what is almost certainly going to happen to John. And that, I was rereading it relatively recently, that does leave the character relatively intact, but undoubtedly there is more of a wolfish tinge there, and that is why I use the phrase wolfish. So will this make him more morally ambiguous? Well, perhaps from a human perspective, but if you're taking it from a wolf perspective, then where does morality fit in there? If the wolfish perspective is to protect pack, is to feed and to hunt and to grow and all the rest of it, if John does those things, is that morally right? I guess so. But if that perhaps from another perspective, we might see that actually might not be as clear as we originally thought. So the short answer is yes, perhaps more morally grey, but we don't know all of the details yet. He will be more wolfish, and what that means is more pack-like, more loner, more ready for the kill, and all the rest of it. Jay Chef, thank you so much, saying Jon Snow looked up to Daario the young dragon when he was growing up, as Arya liked Nymeria. What is the significance of Jon idealizing Daario the First? I don't think that the significance is there in terms of a specific Targaryen. I think it's merely the link across to the Targaryens as a whole. Jon is being linked across to Targaryens is a really important thing. That other Starks would not necessarily be hero worshipping Targaryens; they would be hero worshipping other Northerners. Question from Stephen Dillon. Thank you so much. I heard a theory that Jon will eventually do nothing for the WTD because he will be wrapped up in a second dance, since he did Jack in the Show minus Gathering the Realm. What do you think of that? WTD War of the Dawn, I assume that's about. I think he will. I think that as always, these things are about not about the truth of what someone is so much as what people believe they are. Bloodraven believes that Jon is the one to be doing this, and therefore his actions have a huge impact on the development of the plot as a whole. Is Jon going to have an important role? Yes, I think he will. He will be, I think, the prime candidate to blow the Horn of Winter, which will be raising the dead Starks from the dead, I personally believe. And I think his role is to provide the balance for ice and fire. Now, what I think that means is that he is going to be central to ending whatever happens with the others, pushing them back, undoing the magic that was there. Arya on the show undid the magic, as it were. I've explained that several times, so I'm not going to go into that one again, what they were trying to do on the show. But in the books, I think that Jon is probably the person who is going to be doing that. And then by him killing Daenerys, which for me, I now think is pretty canon, not just because of what happened on the show. I did a video a couple of years before that called Will Jon Kill Daenerys, based purely on her visions in the House of the Undying. I think that it works. All the foreshadowing builds up to that. So I think that he is going to be the key person who pushes back both ice and fire. That, I think, is his role in this going forward. Did I have any more questions from the chat? I think I'm caught up there for a moment. Question from Natalie Donald saying, hi Robert, excited to have a live stream on this great house on my birthday. Happy birthday. I hope you're having a fantastic day. What are your thoughts about the connection to the great empire of the Dawn? In a dream, Dany seems to see her ancestors, and there seemed to be a link there. Ghosts lined the hallway, dressed in the faded raiment of kings. In their hands were swords of pale fire. They had hair of silver and hair of gold and hair of platinum white. And their eyes were opal and amethyst, tourmaline and jade. So the link here, of course, for those who don't know, the Great Empire of the Dawn is this legendary empire that was off in Essos, what we now call Yi Ti, preceding everything that we have of history within Westeros and the Long Night and all the rest of it. And the emperors there had these same titles of opal, amethyst, tourmaline, and jade. So yes, there is a hint there that perhaps the Targaryens may have had, or the Valyrians may have had, a link across to the Great Empire of the Dawn. Similarly, I mean, there are others who may do. You get House Dane, possibly have a link across to them. I personally don't. I mean, although this may well absolutely be the case, I don't think that the importance of this to the story is central. This is just a sort of a building the sort of the mythological backdrop to all of this. So where does Azor Ahai come from? Or whatever the Azor Ahai myth, there's a monomyth of Azor Ahai, which has many different names in many different cultures. It seems originally to come from the Last Men and whatever happened over in the ancestors of Yi Ti. Now, the hint is that over in the ancestors of Yi Ti, the Great Empire of the Dawn, and all the rest of it, perhaps that is where the original hero came from. And it makes sense, therefore, that the new hero in our current story, our new hero will have that same bloodline. But I don't think that that's fundamental to all of this. I don't think that that's necessary to our understanding of all this. I think that, yes, this, for those of us who love the symbolic stuff, then yes, this is the red meat of it all, and shows us the symbolic link all the way through this, right back to the beginning of days. But for the more story driven among us, then we just go, yes, probably. But actually, what's going on in this story? Whether or not she or they or the Targaryens are linked across to that ancient empire is not a hugely important point. Or when I say not a hugely important point, it might be important, but it's not central to our understanding of what's going on. Girl Nettles, thank you again, saying you were the person who did the Check, Marry, Kill. Thank you so much. A big fan, by the way. I love your Twitter. For a cast House of the Dragon using Game of Thrones actors, for example, Kit as Kristen Cole, Emilia Clarke as Alicent, Nikolai as the Conqueror, Littlefinger as Bloodraven. Okay, well, I'll do a couple of these. Thank you. So we've got the two main. I'll do the two main characters. We've got the two main characters in House of the Dragon are going to be, and these are the only two they've done casting calls for so far. That we're going to have Alicent Hightower, and we're going to have Rhaenyra Targaryen. Now, Rhaenyra Targaryen has to be obviously Targaryen-y looks, and she has to be probably slightly older. So let's let's put Cersei there. So we can cast that one off there. We can do a slightly different colored wig for her. And in terms of Alicent Hightower, Carice von Houten, simply because I want her back in the show because she's amazing. Okay, let's go with a question from Henry Fairburn, saying, I really like the style of the World of Ice and Fire and Fire and Blood as they are written how medieval chronicles often were, i.e. chroniclers copying from earlier works to write their newer manuscripts. Apart from Fire and Blood Part 2, do you think George R. R. Martin will ever write any other chronicles, given he already has The Winds of Winter, Dance, Dream of Spring, some more Duncan Egg in the pipeline? we can only hope that the Chronicle of Mushroom will appear. I don't think he's ever going to write it. So for those who are unaware, we have got, and I mean, I don't think we can hold George R. R. Martin to any of his pronouncements on his writing, but he has said his current set of priorities. His first priority at the moment is finishing the Winds of Winter. He is writing it. That's his top priority at the moment. When he finishes that, he is going to do the 4th Dunk and Egg story. He's got 2 in the works. Probably the next one is going to be the She-Wolves of Winterfell. So when Dunk and Egg get up to Winterfell. So Winds of Winter, then Dunk and Egg, then he's going to do A Dream of Spring. And then after that, he's going to do Dunk and Egg Part 5, and then after that he's going to do Fire and Blood Part 2. Now that seems a reasonable set of priorities for him. Given his writing speed, I think that takes him probably into his 80s, and I think beyond that, yeah, let's not hope for anything. So will he do any more sort of chronicling stuff? I don't think so. I think we'll be lucky to get the end of Dunk and Egg is where I'm going with this one. Question from Stuart McCall. Hey, Jedi Master Robert. I like that title. After taking notes on your series of videos about Bloodraven and his political and prophetic maneuverings, I'm still a bit confused about his long-term vision. How is the manipulation of the Targaryen/prince that was promised arc intersect with his tutelage of Bran? Is he only focused on the events surrounding the Long Night, or is he also thinking about the political future of the realm and he's grooming Bran for that role? Okay. I think he's got more than one objective, or I should say he has got one overall objective, which is getting the Weirwood Network, the Children of the Forest as a whole, back in control of Westeros. And in order to do that, they have to see off the various threats, the fire and ice threats, and also just the humans who have taken control. So Bran and John are parts of his grand plan. John is the one who is going to be leading the fight against the others. Bran is the one who's going to take over from him as the Three-Eyed Crow and be a figurehead who can become king. After all, that seems to be what his plan is. I think if we just think Bloodraven is only trying to achieve one thing, that all the evidence suggests otherwise. He clearly has been grooming Bran, and he clearly has been trying to guide John all the way through. He also asked, if I had to choose a Targaryen prequel series between The Dance of the Dragons and The Tales of Dunk and Egg, which would you choose? I think I would choose Dunk and Egg. Sorry, Dance of the Dragons fans, but we know what's going to happen in The Dance of the Dragons. With Dunk and Egg, we don't, and I would love to get more on what's going on there. Okay, let's go to a question from Diego Godoy saying, Hola, Robert. I know that the Long Night prequel was cancelled and HBO is proceeding with House of the Dragon. If both shows were coming out, which of them would you be more excited to see? Also, I've never read Fire and Blood. Is that too different in style compared to the A Song of Ice and Fire novels? Thanks so much. Okay, well, in the first bit, my position is the same as with Dunk and Egg, is that I am really looking forward to House of the Dragon. Do not get me wrong. And the idea of the Dance of the Dragons is one of the most fascinating and wonderful bits of Targaryen history and Westerosi history. I'm really looking forward to it. But if you give me a choice between something where I know what's going to happen and something where I don't, I will go for the thing where I don't. So that is, I was disappointed when the Long Night project was jettisoned. I think that I've no idea whether it was going to be good. There were lots of rumors that perhaps the whole thing was a bit of a hot mess. I don't know. I haven't seen anything. I've not had anything official about that, so I simply do not know. But the idea of a TV show that tells us about what happened in the Age of Heroes, I would love that, because we've got so little actual direct information about it. Shauna Bass saying, "Is Duncan Egg really that good? I see people talking about it so much." Duncan Egg is lovely, and I say that in as good a possible interpretation of the word "lovely" as you can get. It's a very different style to A Song of Ice and Fire. It's almost a children's book in terms of its simplicity, because it's from the perspective of Dunk, who is, by his own confession, thick as a castle wall, and it's beautifully written. We see so much of this world from a ground level. A lot of what we have in A Song of Ice and Fire is written from the 1%'s perspective, the people who have inherited it all. We get that from the lords all the time. We never find out about what's going on with real people. Duncan Egg is about real people. Dunk he came from Flea Bottom. He is a hedge knight. Egg may well be a Targaryen, but they're just wandering the country, and it's written in this beautifully accessible style. So yes, it's great, and I would heartily recommend anyone who's not come across it to be reading it. On the same-ish subject, Diego Godoy, the second bit you're saying, I've never read Fire and Blood. Is it very different in style compared to the Song of Ice and Fire novels? It is a history book, but it is a fake history book, as George R. R. Martin, I think, calls it. And it is written from the perspective of Maester. If you've ever read The World of Ice and Fire, it's that kind of feel. We do get stories within it, but it is also very much from the perspective of a person writing the history. Now, is it too different to enjoy? No, it's written by the same person. It's still a very high standard. I know some people who actually prefer it to the main books. So if you've not tried it, give it a go. You may actually really quite enjoy it. It's different, but I think it's good different. Jamie McKenna, thank you for the super chat, saying, "Robert, you legend. Thank you. Putting in the multi-hour live streams in addition to all the other content. Thank you. You're the best in all the known world." Oh, thank you very much, Jamie. I appreciate that. Question, I've got 2 or 3 more questions to come. So now is a good time to drop any more questions into the chat. I will try and pick up as many as I can. Lady of the Leaves, I think the old gods of the West are opposing the Eastern Church of Starry Wisdom. Underneath all the conflicts of Westeros is an unspoken, unknown struggle. The trees whisper to Bran, the stars whisper to Dany. The duality creates rifts, and the small folks suffer. I don't think this song will ever end. I mean, I'd love that as a way of interpreting this. So the Church of Starry Wisdom, for those you don't know, this seems to have emerged from, we were talking about it a moment ago, from the Great Empire of the Dawn. It's this religion we don't know huge amounts about, but we know that they have temples in various places. Arya passes by one of them in Bravos, for example. So yes, they're looking up to the stars, and the old gods of Westeros are all about the trees, the natural world, and all the rest of it. So yes, there is a sort of a dichotomy of the upper and the as we are. Are they against each other? I don't think they are. I think that they just see different aspects of the same thing. That's my personal take. The struggle is humanity against the others or other things coming against it. So that is where the struggle lies. And I think that both the the Children of the Forest and the Weirwood Network and the Church of Starry Wisdom are both seeing ways in order to be combating that same threat. So I don't think they're against each other. Question from Henry Fairburn saying, what happened to House Velaryon? Did they just die out in the 2nd century? It's strange that such a powerful house and so linked to the Targaryens just ceased to exist. Okay, interesting question. So House Velaryon were indeed one of the 3, outside of the Targaryens, the 3 most powerful houses, along with House Hightower and House Baratheon in Fire and Blood. It's very clear that those 3 are the most powerful houses. Forget the Lannisters and the Starks, all the rest of it. They were also Rans. Those 3 were the big powers when it comes to Seven Kingdoms politics. So what happened to the Velaryons? Well, yes, they did fall a little from power, but they are still there in the books, in the world, in A Song of Ice and Fire. They, in the absence of the Targaryens, who clearly they were their closest allies, in the absence of the Targaryens, then House Velaryon is one of the few significant houses that actually owes its fealty to Dragonstone. Now, that's where Stannis obviously was. And so when Stannis declares himself king, they support him. And the navy from the Velaryons, which is a significant navy, play a big role in the Battle of the Blackwater. They get destroyed, obviously, but Velaryons still seem to be technically supportive of Stannis, and John even sees a banner, a Velaryon banner, in the battle beneath the wall. So at least some Velaryons seem to still be following Stannis. But the main Velaryon character that we come across is this guy called Aurain Waters. Now, he's a Velaryon bastard, and Cersei kind of brings him into her team, makes him master of ships, so basically in charge of the Navy, the Royal Navy. But after her fall from grace and arrest, then Aurain Waters basically flees, and he heads off with his fleet to where we do not know. The suggestion is that perhaps he's going to the Stepstones, those islands that are between Dawn and Essos that used to be the Arm of Dawn, as many others have done to try and declare themselves king of the Stepstones. If so, we will probably see him again when Daenerys and her fleet come. They will have to go through the Stepstones, so it's entirely possible we'll come across him again then. But House Velaryon does still exist from Driftmark. Their current lord is still a child, so we probably won't see huge amounts from them, but Aurain Waters is going to be an influence. Lawnduck20 connected to this says, your last live stream was about House Hightower, a house that played a huge role in the past but not so much recently. Another one is House Velaryon. Who do you think they'll support, and what role does Aurain Waters have to play now? So I think Aurain Waters' main role is going to be being an obstacle to Daenerys. Who are they going to support now? I think they will continue technically to be supporting Stannis until Stannis' claim goes, and then I think they will probably vanish from the narrative. They aren't as significant as they were. Their main role was back in the history once they were connected in with the Targaryens, and with the end of the Targaryens, I think that they're not going to play a huge role. Okay, last question from my patrons. Katie Smith saying, from the early details being released, it seems like House of the Dragon will be more focused on political drama and not really focus on magical elements in the world and the story. I consider ignoring magic as one of the bigger mistakes made in Game of Thrones' later seasons. So in a show about the Targaryens, an objectively magical family, what elements of magic do you think will actually make the cut and be included in the show? I mean, this is a really interesting question. Yes, the Targaryens are an overtly magical family, but their magic is as much as anything to do with their link with the dragons. So I think that most of what we're going to see is about the dragons and the link to the dragons. And I think we're going to see a huge amount of talk about the fact that they've got more dragons than dragon riders. How do they identify dragon riders, and how do you bond with the dragon? All that. I think we're going to see huge amounts of that kind of talk. There are also several people who are rumored to be magic users. Probably the most significant one around that period is Alice Rivers, who was, although I mean there are many accounts of where she came from, but she was at Harrenhal, probably a bastard-born child of one of the Strongs. House Strong was very important during that period, another house that pretty much disappeared. Alice Rivers was allegedly a magic user, and this is one of the things that George R. R. Martin, I think, did very well in Fire and Blood, was that he kept up with this drip of prejudicial understanding of women and magic, by which I mean that whenever a man is supposed to be a magic user, then yes, they might be viewed suspiciously, but they're called sorcerer or magic user or something along those lines. When a woman is apparently a magic user, they're a witch and they're always up to nefarious things. And Alice Rivers is no exception to this. So expect to see her in this story, possibly a few more, but I think that, I mean, maybe I'm slightly cynical about this, that in terms of HBO trying to do things with House of the Dragon, the thing they're going to try and do most of all is deliver something close to Game of Thrones. They do not want to miss with this. They realize that perhaps the ending of Game of Thrones wasn't as good as they'd hoped it was going to be, or it wasn't as well received as they'd hoped it was going to be, and they are going with something they think just is the best bet they've got for a guaranteed win, something that people will tune in and watch. And that means Targaryens, dragons, politics in the Seven Kingdoms, magic outside of that does exist, but it's going to be limited, I'm afraid. So don't get your hopes up too high. Okay, so Stage Page, if that's probably mispronounced there, saying she force chokes people. Yes, that's one of the things that allegedly she did when somebody laughed at what happened, and then they choked to death and had what appeared to be a hand mark around their mouth, and that was apparently her. Okay, I'm just going to have a very quick flick through the chat for any other questions here before we get the seed is strong. Yes, I agree. Weird. The seed is strong is a pun from George R. R. Martin. The seed is strong is something that was said in A Game of Thrones to talk about that you should be following the kind of the genetic hints as to who people's parents are. The seed is strong. Robert Baratheon's children had Baratheon looks. Cersei and Jaime's children had Lannister looks, and so on. So the seed is strong is what that came from. But the pun is that House Strong. There were many the members of that quite often seems to be fathering bastard children, and the seed is strong, particularly within the House Targaryen. Is quite an important point going on if you work your way through Fire and Blood. House Sanchez saying he's the Pirate King. I think this is a reference to Aurain Waters. Yes, this is the idea, is that we've got suddenly we've got a character who has got a navy and is effectively being a Pirate King. That's what being King of the Stepstones is all about. And I think that is probably it. Kingston, is Dunk related to Brienne? Yes. I mean, I've covered this a couple of times before, but yes, George R. R. Martin is very, very, very strongly hinted that that's the case. So Brienne is almost certainly a descendant of Sir Duncan the Tall, to the extent that of which she remembers his shield and paints her shield, or has her shield as Sir Duncan's coat of arms, so to speak. Andrew Kay saying Duncan Egg is excellent, highly recommended to anyone who's not read them. Fun, light, all the medieval elements, political intrigue, Easter eggs, and hints to main series, more history as well. Yeah, absolutely. So that's I would heartily recommend people do read Duncan Egg. Donald People saying, do you think Dany will make it back south to King's Landing, or will she have a Nisa-Nisa-like death to defeat the others? Yeah, I think she will have a Nisa-Nisa-like death. I don't think this is necessarily being in order to defeat the others, but I do not think that she will survive this at all. Okay, so with that, I think I'm going to wrap this one up. If you want to watch any more of these live streams, then there is a link. Oh, if you're not watching live, there is a link going to appear somewhere around here. If you would like to get access to my Patreon, I didn't thank my patrons. Patrons, thank you. If you like this channel and you like what I do, if you want to support the channel, or get access to some of the things I do just for my patrons, then the link is going to be appearing somewhere around here. Okay, that's all for this time. I'll be back next week with another one of these houses that we're going to be discussing. I think I'm probably going to go a smaller house again next week, just a chance to sort of dig into one of the minor houses, but have a look out. There'll be alerts on both YouTube, and I will put something up on Twitter as well. So take care, everyone. I will see you again next week.